As you know, today we are going to be going deep into addiction and mental health. My name is Kibi Kareithi, and I'll be leading you through the program with my lovely wife Koi, who will be coming to talk later. We just want to basically tell people the geography of the area. So there are a place you can stand on my right and behind, and there are ushers who can direct you there. And more importantly, we have a variety of people available for counseling if you need it. For those online, please begin to think through your questions, the questions you want to ask of the panelists who are coming in later. And you're very welcome to hear all that we have for you today. And so I'll start off by inviting Bire to give us a hymn and a prayer.
Thank you, Kibi. Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. I'd like to start with reading a verse from Deuteronomy chapter number 31, verse number 8. The Bible says, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged." And that's an assurance that we have, that even in our season where we struggle with one thing or the other, that the Lord is with us and he will not leave us nor forsake us. I want us to sing a hymn just to affirm those words called Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. Could we stand? Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood. This is my story. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. We say perfect submission, perfect submission, perfect delight, perfect delight. Say visions of rapture, visions of rapture now passed on my sight. Angels descending, bring from above echoes of mercy, echoes of mercy, whispers of love. Say, this is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Say perfect submission, perfect submission. All is at rest, all is. I in my Savior, I in my Savior, I'm happy and blessed. Watching and waiting, watching and waiting, looking out above, filled with His goodness, filled with His goodness, lost in His love. Say, this is my, yes, this is my, say, praising my God. Oh, the day long. Say, this is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Heavenly Lord, thank you for this assurance that you are our Savior. In our times where we need you, you come through for us. And even in seasons where we are in, oh God, we know that your assurance is that you are with us and you will always be with us. Thank you for you tell us not to be discouraged, not to be dismayed, and to have the courage in going through every season and in every storm. Therefore, even in this season, as we talk about mental wellness, your word is so clear, where you tell us that you hope, and this was John talking to the people, and he said, I hope you are well in your health as you are also well in your soul. And therefore, your business is to make sure that we are well in every angle of our lives. And so we pray that you start with us this meeting. Be with us in this meeting. And as we come to the conclusion of this meeting, we pray for your presence. We pray for an alignment with you, so that everyone who is struggling with anything, oh God, you can take it away and make us new again. And this is our prayer of faith in Jesus' name. Amen. Could we celebrate the Lord? Even as I call Kipi back. Oh, yes, he's here. Karibu.
Welcome again, and you may have your seats. So this marks the second year when my family, we call ourselves the Kevoga family. Kibi is just a nickname, the Kevoga family, are taking the church through the wellness ministry, mental wellness ministry, really because, and I think you saw me last year, I have personal experience in dealing with both mental health and addiction in my family. And so we've come from our experience, and we are sharing our experience with the church and the resources that have had to come around us to help our family get progress in a variety of areas towards mental wellness, mental wholeness, a holistic appreciation of what God is doing with those who have difficulties, both in this area, and as the speaker today will say, all of us are on a spectrum. None of us is perfect. All of us are somewhere between a few problems and many problems. And those difficulties are very much in your Father's heart. Those difficulties are things that your Father is asking you to bring to Him, to bring to His throne of grace. And He will give you the resources you need, because this world is not perfect. He brought you here to experience it and to work in it, to make it as much as His kingdom in heaven as you can. But it is not perfect. And ours is to come here and labor with Him in love as we bring, first of all, those who are lost back to Him, but as we reconcile His creation back into His hands, as we help Jesus in the process of reconciling His entire creation. So today, what we're going to basically go through is, last week we discussed mental health and addiction with church workers, being very specific about how church workers and CLG leaders can intervene both in their CLGs and at church to make sure that you bring in those who are suffering, those who may be, for some reason, in this season of their life, requiring assistance. This week, we are going to talk to the church in its entirety. So, Karura, this is about us discussing ourselves, frankly and without hiding, the truth about ourselves, opening up, telling people we all have problems. It's really important that you talk about your problems with your friends, your CLG, your church, so that as we all seek help, we all help one another. And that fulfills what the Lord has commanded us. By this they shall know you, love one for another. And so today, that's what this is about. Love one for another. Seeking those that are lost, that we might restore them back into his kingdom. And we are going to have the first speaker really discuss to the church, what can we do with families who are suffering? What can we do with individuals in our congregations who are suffering? How should we bring one another into a place where healing can be found? We'll then talk to people who have experienced addiction and are now recovering by a variety of ministries that are available both in Karura and through counseling sessions that we can offer you to tell you this is where you can go for help. This is who you can go to for help of the various kinds of things that we can intervene. And we do announce here today that yes, we will have a counseling center in the church. We're just waiting for the container to come from Mombasa, and it'll be fitted out somewhere back there. And you will be able to actually come here and find someone to talk to, someone who is willing to receive you and give you assistance, refer you to a variety of ministries that we have now put in place, and also refer you to psychiatrists and psychologists that we have vetted, and we know their faith, their walk, and their capacity in terms of what they can provide you in terms of healing. We will then switch to a panel. And the panel's work is to receive your questions. So please, those online, those here with us, write down all the questions you have as these two main speakers speak, so that when the panel comes, you know what to ask them, you know how to get more of their experience, you get the most out of them, because they're here for you, they're here for us, they're here for Karura. And really, we're saying, as a church, we really, really want to touch those amongst us who, for whatever reason, do not feel comfortable with where they are right now and are ready to reach out for help. We're also ready to those who don't even know that there's a place you can go. And we're asking, please understand, that place is Karura. We are now able to receive you. We are now able to guide you and tell you where you can go for help. But more importantly, we're now vulnerable enough to just talk with you, to just have a conversation. And that's what this is. It's a conversation about us and our condition as human beings, and where we can obtain both assistance and comfort. That there are those who have been with this problem for many years, willing to talk, willing to receive you, willing to bring you into their own fellowships, so that you can receive the hand of God reaching out for the many who are not only just lost, but suffering. Suffering because no one has talked to them, told them that there is someone who can help. Now, to start us off, today I'll introduce him personally. I won't run around discussing his CV. To start us off, I have someone who is becoming very quickly a friend. When I asked my therapist, Purity Mombi Joroge, or rather Mombi Joroge, she doesn't like the name Purity, Who can discuss addiction? She just told me, Kibi, our go-to person, and our means people of faith, our go-to person is a guy called Albert Muraya. I just know that when I have a problem in addiction, that's who I call. And so that's the name I can give you. And so I asked her for his telephone number, and I called him and said, let's meet up. And surprise, surprise, because I just looked at the name and I thought, well, okay, I'm meeting a stranger. I knew him in 1990 in the UK. And it was a very amusing, as we discussed what we were doing in the UK at that time, and all the friends that we knew in common. But one thing that I realized is that all of us, the friends in common, himself and myself, had walked through what we call in the Bible, enjoy your youth. We enjoyed ourselves in UK, yes, and had walked through that path, and many had fallen off. Because the point with enjoying your youth is many of you can't actually take some of the things you do. And many of my friends, many amongst us, have unfortunately become addicts. And I look back at that time, and myself, together with my brother Kengangi, who is helping me with this ministry, have vowed we are going to look for our friends who fell. We're going to find them, and we're going to ask them, we are here. Come, there is help. And we're going to call them back into the fold of Jesus, into his church, as we tell them, this is where we came. Muraya through his journey, myself through my journey, this is where we came to find our solace with Jesus. And so I want to introduce Muraya, my personal friend, and now pray for him as he begins the day, because this is really what it means, and this is what we're talking about, that how many years now? 40 years later, we can meet by complete accident. And here he is, able to now talk to our church about his experiences, his thinking, his journey, and what he has managed to come up with in terms of how does the church intervene. So without further ado, I'll pray for him as he starts his sermon, and then we'll move on to the rest of the program. Father in heaven, we just pray for your servant who has walked his own journey, has become a testimony of faith, has taught that actually with Jesus it is possible not only to recover and be healed, but to lead others into a journey of recovery and a journey of faith. So now as we hand over to your speaker for the day, we ask that you speak through him, you infill him with the Holy Spirit, you bless his word, that where it goes, it may reach far. And that amongst those who are online, many who hear this may have that urge to talk about their issues with, firstly, the church, but also just their friends, those around them, their CLGs, as their pain becomes something that they can discuss so that they may be healed. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Kibi. Good morning, church. Praise the Lord. It's good to be with you again. I was here last week, as Kibi has said, both on Saturday and Sunday. This weekend I'm just doing today. And last week I taught on addiction and mental health. And today I'll cover some of the same ground, but I want to have more of a focus on family, how addiction affects family, how families respond typically, as well as what family can do when they have addiction in their lives. And I made the point last week that I don't know of a Kenyan family that is not affected by addiction at the first degree level. So your cousins, uncles, aunties, grandparents at that level. I do not know of a single family. And when first degree relatives are affected, it means that you share at least 50% of their genes. And so, meaning that you have a high risk. We talk about predisposition, but a high risk of becoming addicted if you yourself begin to use these substances. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes substances addictive. And I just want to thank Kibi. I've been aware of Kibi all those years. Of course, he's been quite a prominent person in our society. But it was a real surprise to see his communication on my phone out of the blue. And then the connection with Dr. Mumbi and Gilead. And so meeting him in person is the first thing I told him, I know you. And I reminded him where. He was a bit older than me, so he may have forgotten me, but I would not forget him. He's the one who used to take us around in his car in those years. And so it was a lovely surprise to meet him, and now his wife, Koi, and his family, and just the initiative that they have had to bring this about here at Karura. And it's a really commendable initiative, given that it's been the case in the past that churches have shunned issues of mental health or simply misunderstood them or moralized them, attributed them to demonization and things like that, without really understanding the underlying biology and psychology and so forth. So it's a great step. The church is taking this step. So I only have an hour, so I'll crack on, and I don't know if the slides are showing, because I can't see them, but I'll assume they're showing. So you've been told who I am and my qualifications. I'm an addiction professional. I'm a counseling psychologist. I've been in recovery myself for 21 years from alcoholism, by the grace of God. And I talked about my journey on Sunday. So if you didn't watch it, watch the tape. I've always wanted to say that. Yeah, so I won't go more about me. So addiction, we're talking here about chemical addiction. Substance use disorder is its formal name. We're also referring to behavioral addictions, which work in similar ways. And the question is, how or why do some people get addicted? What makes something addictive? And there's a lot of unknowns around this. What we do know is because of research that is being done in the brain, imaging of the brain between people who are healthy and people who have succumbed to addiction, and people who are in recovery, so have been in recovery, say, for 10 years. And they have seen the changes in the brain as a result of it. But what leads to those changes is this thing we're calling psychoactive substances, and that refers to chemicals that are able to penetrate what is known as a blood-brain barrier. And because they're able to penetrate the blood-brain barrier, that is what allows them to change your sensations or your perceptions. And that is what people refer to as being high. The thing about it is that these chemicals are toxins. The brain doesn't need them, the body doesn't need them. Although many, like alcohol and others, have been used since time immemorial culturally for different reasons, for that effect. And it's known that even animals get high. People have observed elephants getting high, primates getting high on fermented fruit and so forth. So the reason this happens is because these chemicals, because of the shape of the molecules and the size of the molecules, are able to penetrate the blood-brain barrier and change or cause the changes that you experience, which we know as highness. And the thing that happens as a result, as I'll explain, is that the brain, some brains love that sensation. Most brains don't. It feels, these are toxins, so you feel sick, you react to them, you even wonder, why do people do these things? Because I just feel dizzy or I feel bad. But some brains, some people, their brains just love the chemicals. They have the opposite effect, and that's the beginning of the problem. Before I go into that, we classify psychoactive substances according to the effect on your brain and the central nervous system into 4 categories. The first being stimulants. These are substances that cause or speed up the activity of your brain and your central nervous system. So things like cocaine and methamphetamines, but they also include nicotine and caffeine, which are legal substances. We use these legally, but they do alter your perception slightly. You know, people are used to drinking coffee. They'll talk about, I need a coffee. I need a coffee to get me going, or I need a coffee to stay up and do something. The same with nicotine. People who smoke say that it helps them to concentrate or to focus. So they do have a mild effect on your perceptions, but not as great as others. Then there are opioids that have the opposite effect of slowing down your brain and central nervous system. Opioids were initially used medicinally. So morphine was derived from opium, which is a plant, and it was known for its pain-killing effects. But along the way, people discovered that it changed how they felt and they liked it. And so they have then derived more potent forms of the same, which is heroin, and there are even stronger chemicals, derivatives than heroin. But opioids include codeine, which is found in cough syrups. And this is something that many young people are misusing. Codeine addiction is a pandemic in Nigeria, for instance. It's about 80% of the cough syrups being produced in Nigeria are being misused by young people. They're not used for their medicinal purposes. Then you have another category called depressants. This is where alcohol falls. And they act in similar ways to the opioids in the sense of depressing your central nervous system. And then you have these others, which are benzodiazepines, which are used as anxiolytics when people have anxiety to calm them down. And they're also used when helping people withdraw from alcohol addiction. So they're used to detoxify people who have alcohol addiction. Benzodiazepines are also very addictive. And so they are misused in that way. And then another category are these things called hallucinogens, which change your perception. You begin to hear colors. You begin to taste music or taste sound. It just distorts completely how your nerves work and how your brain work. Although they are said to be less addictive, their addictive potential is not as great, but they are misused. And then there's cannabis, which does not belong in any category because it works differently for different people at different times. These chemicals can be ingested in different ways, by smoking, by snorting, by drinking, by eating, the different parts of the body that you can ingest them through. And the significance of that is that it has an effect on the addictive potential of that chemical and the way that you have used it. So the fastest effect is smoking. It acts within seconds, and things that are smoked also tend to have the highest addictive potential. Then intravenous injections are next, and so forth. So what is this thing I'm referring to as addiction? Let's not assume we are on the same page about its definition. And it's defined in the medical books as a chronic relapsing brain disease. Chronic in the sense that one does not get a cure for it. All one can do is arrest it, and that becomes relevant as we move along. Because it's chronic, there's a tendency to relapse. And one can relapse from other diseases as well, things like diabetes, asthma, arthritis, and so forth. And so the relapsing with addiction involves choice, but it also involves being overwhelmed to the point where one finds that they cannot do anything other than go back to using their drug. And so we talk about recovery being a journey or a process. It's not an event. Simply because I've not used my drug of choice today does not necessarily mean I'm in recovery. It means I'm abstinent. Recovery is abstaining, that is not using the drug, plus positive change. And without that positive change, one can't be said to be in recovery. They simply have stopped using their drug of choice. As we will see, because of the way addiction affects the whole person, recovery involves change in the whole person, not just not using the drug. There are other things that need to happen. And addiction involves compulsive drug seeking, which means even when it's a bad idea, even when it's inappropriate, when the person finds that they are obsessing over the drug, then they must use it. I was telling the congregation on Sunday how I'd leave my house at 4 in the morning to go and look for something. And I'd persuade myself I cannot sleep until I've had that something. I'd drink my rent. I would be, using the alcohol, whatever it was, or recovering from it when I should be in class, when I should be doing assignments, when I should be doing different things. And so it is characterized by this compulsive drug seeking, which is what makes addiction so puzzling. It doesn't make sense. A person would do the things they do to access their drug. So how do we justify calling it a disease? There are 4 criteria that will categorize a phenomenon as a disease. The source, the cause of it, which is referred to as the etiology, its path, what happens if it's not treated, the signs and symptoms, that is how can you detect that it's present, as well as the effect it has on the body. So for addiction, the cause of addiction is a substance or the behavior, whatever that may be. It is called the etiological agent. But there are other factors, as we'll look at, that are involved in causing addiction beyond the substance itself. The environment, and as we've already mentioned, your genetic predisposition. But without the substance, there wouldn't be any addiction. So if you don't want to get addicted, the thing is not to use a substance. Once you use a substance, you're taking a risk that you'll become addicted. In terms of the path, if left untreated, addiction will lead to death. It'll lead to mental illness, other types of mental illnesses, and it will lead to being institutionalized, whether in prison or in psychiatric units and so forth. About 80 or 85% of the global prison population are in prison primarily because of things they did as a result of their addiction. And if you can recall, when COVID started and worldwide there were lockdowns and so people couldn't go to bars, etc., emergency rooms, casualty departments in hospitals were idle, showing that a lot of the accidents, a lot of the incidents that happen as a result of alcohol or other drug use. So part of its path is a chronicity. Chronicity meaning it cannot be cured. We talk about being in recovery. We talk about recovery requiring a change of lifestyle, but one will never get to a place where they can say, I don't have this thing anymore, I can go back and drink and without a problem. Once you're an addict, you're always an addict, according to this understanding. And the reason for that is that the way the brain works changes. It can heal, it can recover if you stop using your drug of choice, but that takes time. On average for alcohol, it takes a few months, 6-9 months before you begin to really feel that something has changed. The cravings have reduced or have been eliminated. The lack of sleep that one used to experience has been eliminated. Maybe the anxiety or the paranoia that somebody used to feel has gone. That'll take months if it's alcohol. It'll take years if it's marijuana. It takes much longer for the brain to heal from marijuana than it does for alcohol, and the same for all other drugs. So there is a process of healing that can happen and get the brain to go back to the way it used to function. But there's always a risk of relapse. Relapse risk is ever present. In terms of signs and symptoms, I'll go into more detail later about how you can tell somebody has a problem or how they themselves can tell that they have a problem. And as we've said, alcohol, let me use alcohol because it's a common one, goes into every cell in your body. And so it's not just the brain whose functioning is affected. Every single organ in your body is affected by alcohol. The key ones being kidney, pancreas, liver, heart, as well as, of course, the brain. And some of them have an ability to heal. The liver is a wonderful organ. It has an ability to heal itself if you stop damaging it. But there are others when once the damage is present, it'll always be present. You think of your kidneys, think of your pancreas. So people, alcoholics, for instance, have a very high correlation with diabetes as a result, heart disease, hypertension, and so forth. So the addiction will damage the body in many different ways. And for some people, it is that organ damage that is first noticed that will tell the physician or something that this person's lifestyle is causing this. We're referring to addiction being substance use disorders, but there are also behavioral addictions. Gambling addiction is recognized in the medical books as being a mental illness. But we now have internet gaming addictions, we have compulsive eating, sex addiction, porn addiction. Somebody once said that anything that changes how you feel is potentially addictive. So you'll find there are people who get addicted literally to relationships, either to specific people or different types of relationships. For instance, I once met a lady who was a chronic note taker. She was traveling through Kenya. She found out that there were AA meetings, so she came to an AA meeting and she told us her addiction is chronic note-taking, and I kid you not. Through that meeting, she was scribbling little notes on tiny, tiny pieces of paper. And I guess it's a form of obsessive-compulsive disorder, I guess. But that was her addiction. And she said she benefited from coming to the meeting. I can't remember if she shared or not. But the point is she was with other people in recovery, so she got a benefit from that. So people can become addicted to many different things. All right, so how can you tell somebody's addicted? What are the signs or the symptoms? The medical books have 11, and here I've condensed them. The first one is a strong urge to use the substance, which we call craving. Now, not everyone craves, or rather, the craving can be physical in your body, but it could also be psychological. And some substances don't really have a strong physical craving. Things like cannabis, for many people, it's not a strong physical craving, but it's more psychological. Same with cocaine. Whereas with others like heroin and alcohol and nicotine, the physical craving is also very strong. But that's one sign. Then another one is difficulty in controlling use, which can be seen in two different ways. One is using more than you intend. And this is often an early sign for the individual that they keep either drinking more or spending more time doing their drug of choice than they had intended. And the other side is then they try to control it, they try to reduce it, or they try to eliminate it, and they keep failing. That is a sign that there's a problem. As we'll look, however, there is a way of thinking that fools the person themselves that everything is okay. We call that denial. We'll look into that. Another sign is you continue using despite harmful consequences. In fact, this now is a clear indication that something has changed and something is wrong. You are doing something that is causing you harm or causing other people harm, and you keep doing it. Think about people who drink and drive, for example. Firstly, it's illegal, then it's dangerous, and very often they'll damage their car or whatever, but they keep doing it. And so you find that it is said that you can always tell a vehicle owned by an alcoholic or a mlevi because the car is damaged and they never bother repairing it because they know next week I'm going to damage it again. But there are other sorts of harmful consequences that people will experience or incur but keep using. Think of people who are habitually late on Monday morning, or who leave work habitually early on Fridays, who don't turn in their work or don't turn in their quality of work. They know that they can, and this becomes a habit. And so they begin to look for excuses to justify it. Another thing is giving higher priority to the drug of choice than to other duties or obligations. Again, this shows that the priorities have changed, and accessing that drug or accessing that behavior becomes paramount. And you'll find, and this is especially true of behavioral addictions, the person's lifestyle is completely adjusted to access whatever it is that they're doing. You know, the hours they work, where they work, the kind of work they do, who they marry, where they live, etc., is defined or controlled by that behavior or that drug of choice. Then there's increased tolerance. We said earlier that the brain changes in the way it works as a result of the habitual ingestion of drugs. And one of the effects of that is to desensitize itself to the chemical. Because remember, the chemical is a toxin. The brain is not meant to have that chemical. And so the brain, in order to defend itself, will reduce its responsiveness or its sensitivity to that chemical. And so what the person experiences is that they need more and more of the chemical to achieve the desired effect, whatever that desired effect is. And the result is, if it's alcohol, you end up drinking more and more, or whatever it is, whatever other chemical. And in a country like ours, where socially, culturally, consumption of alcohol is seen as a positive thing, I remember those who could drink a lot were considered to be more macho or somehow better than the rest. And so when you begin to notice that your tolerance is increasing, often that's seen as a good thing. I've had lady clients who will tell me, I can drink like a man, because they can outdrink many of the people they drink with, and for them, that's a badge of honor, at least in that culture. So this is a sign of increased tolerance. This is what it's called. And in fact, the increase in tolerance is really what activates the addiction. There are people who use, say, painkillers after surgery or giving birth, whatever, because of pain. And then they discover that they really, really like it. And then what they find is that they need to have more of the painkiller to achieve the desired effect. And sometimes it could be that they need more of the medicine to remove the pain that they're experiencing. This is a sign of tolerance, and it's very dangerous when it comes to prescription medication, because that is how people get into addiction over prescription medication. And those are some of the hardest addictions to treat. And then the last one is physical withdrawals when you stop using the drug. Now, this doesn't happen with all drugs, certainly, and it doesn't happen with everyone. In fact, it's a sign of what we call tissue dependency, which means your sort of end-stage addiction. If I can use alcohol as an example, many people who are brought to people like me or go to rehabs are not yet tissue dependent. Therefore, they do not need to be detoxified once they stop drinking. But for those who do, withdrawals can be dangerous even, whether from alcohol or from some other things. And so that detoxification needs to be done under medical supervision. But that is a sign of what we call tissue dependency. That the body has become dependent. Every single cell in the body has become dependent on alcohol, if it's alcohol, to function. So, we talked about the criteria for determining whether addiction is present. But now, as a lay person, how can you tell that addiction is present? It's actually not that you can tell addiction is present. That takes an assessment. But what you can tell is that somebody is using something. This is particularly relevant for parents when they think about their children. But if you think about yourselves as a congregation, within your CLGs, or even within your families, there are things to look out for to tell you that something has changed. It may not necessarily be a chemical being ingested, but when you see these things, this is cause to stop and have a conversation with that person. So things like bloodshot eyes, pupils that are dilated, which means that they're very large, which happens with stimulants, or when they're constricted, which means they're very small. That happens with opioids. Somebody has a constantly running nose and they don't have a cold or an infection. The breath will tell you that they've ingested something. For those who use injection drugs, needle marks on the skin, or discoloration with our skin, maybe discoloration is not so easy to see. Speech, especially when somebody's intoxicated, will tell you that. But you can always tell somebody who uses weed, for instance, because the speed at which they talk slows. There's a guy I follow on YouTube for something else, and I can guarantee you that guy uses weed. He's very good at what he does, but just the way he speaks, I can guarantee you he's using weed. I know nothing about him, but that is one of the signs. Once a cop busted me. I'd gone to score weed somewhere, and he asked me, why do you want to look older than you are? And he told me that's what happens when you use weed. You look 10, 15 years older than your age. So that could be a sign of longer-term use. Unexplained fatigue, change in sleep patterns. These are the physical signs. And this can tell the user themselves that something is changing. It's not just for telling whether somebody else has changed. You can tell yourself that something has changed in the way your body is managing that chemical. Then there are behavioral addictions, and often these are the most problematic. So if you think of a family, it's when the person's behavior changes that problems begin. So changes in performance, whether they're students, whether they work, the quality of their work, delivering it on time, the quantity of it, and so forth. Social changes, they change their friend groups. You'll see this with young people, but you'll see this with most people. You change the people you hang out with. Often that is a sign that something has changed, especially if those changes cannot be explained otherwise. Then mood and personality changes. This is really critical. For those who live with an addict or an alcoholic, their experience of it is that you cannot tell who will come home today. Which version of this person will come home today? And this is particularly traumatizing for children, because children need certainty. They need routine, they need structure. The need for mom to be the way she is all the time. The need for dad to be the way he is all the time. If he's this way one day and this another way another day, it's very difficult for the children, and they'll tend to withdraw. Financial issues, addiction is expensive to maintain. Secretiveness and dishonesty. Often, the person, because they are messing up, what they're doing is causing harm, they're not upfront about it. They hide, there is unexplained absences, unexplained phone calls. Once somebody was quite open with their phone, now they don't want you to access it, and things like that. Then apathy and lethargy. Apathy is loss of interest in things that used to interest you. And this, you'll see it with children. They lose interest in their hobbies or the things that they used to have fun with, or they just don't have energy. But this applies to adults as well. And then, of course, the things that people use to consume their drugs, be it needles, be it things that they use with weed, matches, and so forth. Then there's a psychological, which is where the longest damage is. The changes in the brain lead to confusion. Decision-making becomes a problem. Problem-solving is an issue. Planning, prioritizing, that sort of thing. Then there are psychotic symptoms, which is where you lose touch with reality. You're hallucinating, especially delusional thinking. You believe things that are not true, or the way you reason changes and doesn't make sense to people around you. anxiety, heightened anxiety. And this is a direct result of the chemical effect of whatever the chemical is, if it's alcohol or cannabis or heroin. All of these will create anxiety either in the presence of the drug or in its absence. Cocaine will create anxiety in its presence. Paranoia, which is not dissimilar to anxiety, but just fearing things that are not true. I know weed used to make me very paranoid. Sometimes I was so afraid I couldn't sleep. It was just terrible. You wonder why are you doing this to yourself? And then denial. Denial is not lying on purpose. Denial is inability to see a painful reality. And there would be no addiction without denial, because you're doing things that are harming you, harming others. They are irrational, but because your brain loves this chemical so much, you find that you come up with all sorts of rationalizations and justifications, excuses, comparing yourself to others, just flat out denying, to keep justifying the use of the drug. And so when we talk about treatment or recovery, breaking denial is one of the first things that we need to do. And then denial also is not static. It changes. As the disease progresses, the denial will change. What used to work before, like saying simply, I don't use, and the person's falling over drunk, and they're claiming they don't drink, no longer works. So they'll have to come up with other ways of reasoning. And the denial, in the end, only the addict or the alcoholic believes it. No one else does. But it's enough to keep them in that behavior. So as I've referred to the progression of addiction, it doesn't stay the same. You start off by experimental use, which is what a lot of young people are doing. Surveys show that up to 70% of young people will have, say, tried alcohol within a given area, or 30, 40% will have tried weed at some point. And as long as you do not use a chemical, then there's no risk of addiction. But as soon as you experiment with it and you can hear the proportions are high, then you're putting yourself at risk. And you cannot, although there is, as I say, there's genetic predisposition, and in my view, I don't know a human being who does not have some exposure there, then you're taking a risk. There are many people who use chemicals safely, at least for now, and so you might think that I'll be one of those, but you can never know. Then the progression moves to what we call circumstantial, which is now when you're using for certain occasions, like anniversaries, to celebrate, for ritualistic purposes and so forth, and specifically because of the desired effect. Now you're looking for the highness now. You're gone beyond experimenting. And so that shows that something is changing even in your brain. And then you come to a place where your using is more intensified, it's more regular, say every weekend or every end of month. And you're, again, seeking that effect. The relief from it is no longer even so much about the highness. Perhaps it's about taking the edge off, relaxing, being able to socialize, or whatever it is. And then ultimately there's compulsive or addictive use, which is when you have to use, otherwise you don't feel normal. And again, initially it may not be a physical thing, it could be purely psychological, but eventually becomes physical. So you can ask, with all these problems, why would anyone use drugs in the first place? And then any number of reasons. As I say, it depends on the culture, the cultural context, the chemical involved itself. But people use out of curiosity, people use for social acceptance, people use because it's being modeled around you. If your elders are using something, or people you admire. I remember when I was in high school, I won't say which one, about 70% of the teachers smoked. Those days, they would even smoke in class. Yeah, and some of them were priests, right? So that looked so cool. And then those days, my parents also smoked. So that was just being modeled for me. So I saw that as a norm. And I remember one time my dad telling me to stop smoking. I'm thinking to myself, I was about 14 or 15. I'm thinking, who are you to tell me to stop smoking? And he's smoking even as he's telling me that. So modeling is very powerful. Children don't listen to what you tell them. They'll watch what you do. And that's what they'll copy what you do because you're normalizing it. And then beyond that, they use to feel better. They discover that this thing will help me in some way. And this is especially true of people who have another mental illness, whatever it might be, which is independent of the drug use. They discover that using that chemical will make them feel better. They use it sort of like medicine. And then others will use it because of social anxiety to perform better and so forth. So there are many reasons why people would use. The point is, no one intends to be addicted. And that's what we need to remember. Sometimes it's easy to moralize and look at somebody as being weak, etc. But no one intended to get addicted. Okay. So how is it that some people get addicted and not others? Their addiction is complicated. There are multiple things at play. We mentioned genes being one. They say for alcohol, genes are about 60 are responsible for, in terms of weighting, for 60% of the addictive potential is because of genes. But then there's social learning, as we've seen. There's also just the environment, the access to the drugs. I was saying last week that in countries where the drug trade is big, you'll find that addiction also grows, simply because of availability. Prescription medicine addiction is particularly high in the medical industry, simply because of access. The first rehab in Kenya was set up as a drying out place for Catholic priests because they could access alcohol, and the doctrine is different from other denominations, and so there was a higher incident simply because of access. So environmental factors, and as we'll look, environmental factors could either be increase a risk or they can be protective against addiction. And then there are individual factors, things like trauma. Somebody who's experienced trauma is likely to look to something to make them feel different because they're really struggling with that trauma. Mental illness as well, especially psychosis. You have psychosis that we call it organic, it came on its own, and then you discover that weed makes you feel a bit different. And so you begin to use weed for that reason. And in fact, people who start using something like weed because they had psychosis, it's very, very hard to get them to stop using the weed. For them, it's medicine. Then the age at which you started using. This is critical. The later you can delay onset of drug use or even experimentation, the lower you risk addiction happening. This is really, really important. When you look at prevention, and there's a whole science behind prevention, this is a critical strategy. Try to delay onset of use. The earlier people begin to use, the greater the risk that they will become addicted. And also, as we saw, the ways it is being ingested. There are some ways of ingesting, like if you eat weed or something, the addictive potential is lower than, say, if you smoke it. So the thing to know, I was surprised to find that even things like heroin are not 100% addictive. Possibly 30-40% of people who try heroin become addicted. About 15-20% of people who try alcohol become addicted, and even lower for other chemicals. So it's a bit of a lottery in that sense. But the only way to guarantee you will not be addicted is not to use a chemical. All right. So what are the consequences? We refer to the biopsychosocial model. So there are medical consequences, there are psychological, we've looked at those, there are social, we're going to look more in the family, and then ultimately there are spiritual. As we saw last Sunday, in a way your relationship with a chemical, once you become addicted, is one of idolatry. This is true also of behavioral addictions. All right, let me just say something about drug use in women or addiction in women, because the experience is a bit different. There's something called telescoping, which means that the progression that we've just seen is much faster for women than for men, primarily because of physical differences. Women are smaller, they have less water in their system, and they have more fat as a proportion of their total body. And so that means that the drug is metabolized differently. It remains in the system for longer. They eliminate it more slowly. And so as a result, the physical and the psychological progression is faster. And then they also experience more severe problems, both medically and physically, but also socially. On top of which, women generally, compared to men, are at greater psychological risk, or rather they have greater risk factors for psychological issues, be it trauma, be it stigma, be it the stress of parenting, financial stress, and so forth. So for those two reasons, both the physiological but also the social, the onset and the severity of addiction for women is greater than for men. And then also, because of childbearing, that's an additional factor that makes addiction different for women than for men. If a woman is using substances when she's pregnant, that child is ingesting those substances. And so you find children are born addicted to whatever it is, and they have a terrible time in the first even 2 years as a result. They also tend to have, they don't develop as well in the womb. And then also once they're born, the mother is not, she's just not as switched on in terms of child caring and so forth. There's a lot of neglect and so on. So they do far, the outcomes for, because of that fetal effect is far more detrimental for children whose mother was using something when she was pregnant. And then we've talked about addiction and youth responses. The key thing to remember is that the brain of the teenager is still developing. The brain is only fully developed at the age of 25, 26. So the effect of that is that the long-term damage to the brain, the risk is far greater the younger you start using. But then also the good thing with it is that the younger the person is, if they were to stop using, then they have the potential for healing. The brain is much better than, say, for an adult. So there's that factor as well. Then let's look at so that is really, we covered that last week. So let's look now at addiction and the family. And the first thing to note is that there is a two-way relationship between what we're calling family dysfunction and addiction. Families are systems. They work in certain ways, and those systems work better or less well. And those systems involve structures, it involves rules, it involves hierarchies, it involves roles within the whole family. Many of these are explicit, they are stated, but others are implicit, they are unspoken. All families have secrets. And you'll see this, especially as a child, if you go to somebody's house, you just note how differently it functions. That's because every home, every family has rules. Now, those rules either work well or they work less well, and we refer to that as dysfunction. Dysfunction can predispose people to using chemicals because dysfunction is stressful, whether for the parents or for the children. Equally, use of chemicals can also then activate dysfunction. It can lead to dysfunction. If you think about a situation where you have one child who's an addict, then the rhythm of the whole family changes because of that. This is why we refer to addiction being a family disease. Now, typically, when addiction has set in, the first thing, many families will deny the problem, either because of shame or stigma, or even because of ignorance. Or sometimes they simply don't know. They'll avoid the issue because it's complicated, it's confusing, and it's intractable. They talk, they give lectures. I can't imagine. My parents gave me so many lectures about my behavior, but it was in one ear, out the other. Sometimes my dad would even ask me to comment on what he said. And I was, Zuba, what? I wasn't even listening. What happens is that the addict in your life becomes so overwhelming, other genuine needs are neglected. We say that addicts don't have relationships, they take people hostage. They take over your life if you allow it. As a result, there's a lot of secrecy, there's loss of trust within the family. And then some families, especially if it's one of the parents who's got the addiction problem, they will detach from other people. So you'll just notice that family no longer attends functions, or if they attend functions, they don't really talk, so you don't really know what's going on with them. There's a loss of identity. Firstly, because boundaries, which are the rules that people have that allow them to be distinct, allow them to be safe from one another, become blurred because roles become distorted. And so people lose a sense of their individuality when there's addiction in the home. Then for young people who are growing and maturing, addiction does disrupt that emotional development, whether it's a young person who's using their chemicals, or if it's their parent who's addicted, then the normal expectations of the availability of a parent for different things is not met. And so you find that the child learns not to speak up when they have needs, or that it's not safe to speak up. And so they keep things within themselves, and that they'll grow up with. And so you'll have this phenomenon of the adult child of alcoholics who tend to be very secretive, for instance, because they grew up learning that sharing real needs is not safe. As we said, there's other people and other needs tend to get neglected because of the focus on the addict, and other genuine needs as well. And the reason that this happens, you find that, or rather there are, we'll look at this in a bit, but there are 4 different ways families respond to addicts in their lives. One is by trying to protect them, shielding them, justifying them, making excuses. And you'll find that this can lead to marital conflict, because parents will not necessarily view the addiction problem in their child the same way. And so one of them might be trying to protect the child, and not necessarily the mother. Sometimes it's the father who's trying to protect the child, and then the mother wants to tough love, and so they disagree. Some of them will respond by emotionally by pleading with the addict, and that's useless, because this addict now is into what they're doing is irrational behavior. So pleading with them is not going to have much effect, but people do. Then there's obsessing over the addict, which is trying to control the addict in different ways, whether by bribing them, by threatening them, but being unable to sleep. This guy hasn't come home yet. If they're abroad, for instance, just constantly worrying about the addict in your life. I'm referring to parents a lot, but this can also be the other way. I've had children tell me that they couldn't sleep until they heard dad's car come home. And then they said it doesn't matter what condition he was in, as long as he was home. So it affects everybody. It can affect anyone. Then the 4th way is withdrawing from the addict. And it used to be thought that was a negative way of responding, but more recent research is showing that can in fact be a positive, and we'll look at that, how withdrawing from the addict can be a positive. So decision-making is affected, rule-making is affected, because the rules are being flouted all the time. They become useless. And so to avoid confrontation, then you put rules into abeyance, or the rules apply for others but not for that one person, as the case may be. And then there's something called parentification, which is reversal of roles. I've had situations where, especially a teenage daughter, the mother's an addict, so the teenage daughter takes on the role of mother, even with her mother. So she's the one reminding her mother about medication. She's the one reminding her mother about what needs to be done. The mother finds, decision making or problem solving very difficult. So the teenage daughter is the one doing it for her. And it's a very interesting phenomenon to see that happen between them. But it's very damaging to the child. Parentification doesn't only happen in addiction. I've seen parentification happen where the mother was physically disabled. She was she was an amputee, double amputee of her legs. And so as the daughter grew and she was the firstborn, the mother gave more and more responsibility to the daughter inappropriately. And this led to real emotional damage to that lady. I met her when she was a lady as a result of it, and she had never really gotten over it. And then there's this phenomenon called codependency, which is, in essence, simply put, judging what is right based on somebody else's response. Having no basis yourself for knowing whether something is right or not. And so your sense of well-being is always based on whether somebody else is okay or not. And that makes you get trapped into somebody else's emotions. And again, codependency is not only there in addiction, it can be there in other situations, but it's especially common where there's addiction. And then you have this notion of roles in families, people playing different roles as a result of, could be addiction, it could be mental illness, it could be a marital problem, or even poverty leads to these sorts of roles being played out. But when the family is facing a chronic problem, you find that somebody becomes the enabler who tries to make everything okay, papering over, the one who makes excuses for the family, and so forth. You have the hero who tries to distract by overachieving in some way or other, doing very well in school and so forth, so to distract the family away from the problems that they're experiencing. And then you have the scapegoat. Often the addict is a scapegoat, is a black sheep. So although there may be other problems, and we'll look at that, the addict, all the fingers are pointed at the addict for anything that goes wrong. Then there's a clown, or the mascot, again, who tries to deflect or distract by being funny, and often it's inappropriate. And then the lost child is the one who disappears somewhere between the cracks. Okay, now that is sort of the traditional way that we thought of families responding to addiction. And you can see it's not very empowering. Now, other researchers have looked at that behavior and are redefining it. And they've come up with this thing they call the stress, strain, coping, and support model. The stress is the addiction or any other problem. It could be poverty, it could be mental illness, anything that stigmatizes a family, but we're talking about addiction today. The strain is the experience of that stress to the individual in the family. And the strain will be different for different family members, depending on their role and depending on the person who has the problem. Now, the coping is what they do with the strain. What I was referring to earlier are ways of coping, and we used to look at those ways of coping as being, we use this word disempowered. Those ways of coping were taking power away from you. But we're looking at these ways of coping slightly differently today. Now, one of the things that people do is putting up with a problem, which is sort of what we're referring to as enabling. Another is standing up, and we'll look at what standing up looks like. And then a third is withdrawing from the situation. I'll go into some detail. And then depending on the way of coping, then families look to support. They'll come to church. We'll talk about Al-Anon today. They go to Al-Anon. They look for information. They'll go to a professional. There are different things that families do. So if you're a family member here today, and maybe you have an addict in your life, coming here is a form of support. It is a way you're coping with the issue. And, all right. So engaged coping refers to where you challenge or confront the problem. Now, this raises the temperatures, as you can imagine. It involves firming or establishing boundaries and then really working to maintain them. If you establish boundaries, they'll be tested, especially with an addict. Whatever rule you establish, they'll test it. It involves assertive communication, expressing your emotions, not hiding them, but also owning your emotions. Saying, when you do this, I feel that, using I statements. It means encouraging the addict, whoever it is with a problem, to find help and be proactive about it. You have a problem, you go look for help for yourself. And supporting that, facilitating that in some way. It also involves proactively helping the addict solve problems in their lives, the other problems that they're having. So not disengaging from the addict, but also engaging with them in a constructive way, in a way that is conditional. I remember my mom telling me she'd help me with anything, but if I ever have alcohol on my breath, I shouldn't come home. And she was serious. And she enforced it, so I knew. If I have a drink, I can't go home for 2 days. So I knew that. And she stuck to it. She would help me with other things. Accountability. Accountability is not reporting. Accountability is helping the person reinforce what they have agreed. And we have seen in many ways that change is very hard without accountability. But if there's accountability, it helps to promote change. And we're talking about change here that is difficult. And then, of course, information seeking. This is all a way of coping with it in an engaged way, which is what you are doing here today. Seeking information for yourself or for your loved one. Then there is tolerant or inactive coping. Now, we used to see this in a negative way, but really what the person is doing is accommodating a situation that they cannot otherwise influence. So learning to fight your battles, learning to choose your battles. There's some battles that are useless to fight. So minimizing harm for the other family members. Especially this happens either early in the addictive behavior or much later in the addictive behavior. If it's not a good long-term strategy, but it's a good way of dealing with something when you're otherwise overwhelmed and you don't have other options. And it avoids direct confrontation, which you may judge to be damaging. So firstly, acceptance. It involves self-sacrifice, delaying your own needs to help this person sort themselves out. What looks like enabling is really keeping the peace. If you've got other people in the home, you don't want a confrontation, you think about them, it might be more wise to accommodate at that point. Trying to maintain the normalcy of the home. And of course, this is more burdensome for the individual who's doing it. But it may be the only option you have at that point. So you can go to people and say, I have an addict in my life, and they say, go confront them. But when you think about it, you realize, in my circumstances, confronting them may not be wise. This is especially true, for instance, if, say, it's the breadwinner who's the addict. Going to confront them may not be wise, especially if, say, you're a child. You may need to learn how to accommodate them and get your needs met in whatever other way you can, at least for that time. A third way of coping that families are engaging in, which all of these are to preserve the family, is to withdraw. Now, withdraw means seeking independence, reducing the stress of the addict's behavior on you or on the family when you have no other leverage, when you have no other power to enforce change. So prioritizing other people who have needs in the home, taking care of your own needs as well, avoiding the addict completely. So I had a 50-year-old alcoholic. His mother was in her 80s. He was her dependent still because of the addiction. And what she had done is she had constructed for him an outhouse, which was more or less self-contained, not very comfortable, but it allowed her not to see him every day. And she was doing it to preserve her own sense of well-being. So disengaging with them as if they're not there. I know my mother did this with me at some point, and I believe, she disengaged with me, and it made a difference. I realized that it made a difference in the sense that I knew she was not available to me anymore. I had to go and find my own solutions. And then emotional detachment. Again, this is to preserve yourself. in a situation in which you're overwhelmed. So those are the two different ways of looking at typically how families respond. The thing is, in this second way, you are trying to preserve yourself, your energies, and your your dignity. So I'll just say something quickly as I come to a close on why families should be involved in management of substance use disorder. Family dysfunction can precede substance use, but helping somebody deal with their substance will also help the family in its functioning overall. Helping somebody deal with their addiction will also give the family the boldness and the courage to deal with other issues, right? Interventions will also decrease or reduce other conflicts that had nothing to do with the addiction, because you get used to talking about yourselves in an honest way. And then the strengths that the family have, whether it's social capital, whether it is their own strength of personality and so forth, can become part of the addict's recovery capital. Recovery capital are those resources that the addict has to help them in their recovery. So the emotional strength of the family can be very useful there. So those are the reasons that families, at the end of the day, should get involved with their family member in managing the substance use. And with that, I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert. My name is Koe Kibuga. My husband was up here earlier. We're going to take a short break, and I would love for you to, as you're having tea and getting your health break, discuss some of the things that you have heard today. The slides will all be available on our church website, so please don't panic. And we would love for you also, Sambaza, the link. If you go to our YouTube page, this is actually running live, and we would love for you to Sambaza it. We know that this is a very hard topic to deal with. So we are not, first of all, we are not embarrassed. We understand that because of what we as our family have gone through, this is a critical discussion to have. And if you would love, please go back, look at the trainings of last year, the videos that we did last year. You'll see how, for us as a family, dealing with the mental health helped us deal with the addictions and helped us understand what was happening in our own home and with our relatives. So please do go back. One of the reasons why we are taping these series is that they will always be there in perpetuity. So keep going back and forth, having a look at what's out there. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, hopefully. 15? 15. They are trying to give you more time. I am refusing. So we'll take a 15-minute break. There will be some tea available. Those of you who are online, please come back. I'm going to ask them to put up the Mentimeter QR code, Kaka. So Mentimeter is an anonymous app. So we would like for you to scan it, put up what your big takeaway for the first session is. We'll also use Mentimeter just before the panel so that you are able to ask your questions anonymously. We want to protect you, but we want you to be as candid and as honest as you can. My doctor likes to tell me, I can only treat you to the extent of your honesty. Yeah? You know those questions, how much wine do you drink? 1 glass, really? How, you know, they have the others, the vitals, the weight and what. How many times do you have a headache? You know, have you been checking your blood pressure? As honest as you are able, as you are, is what the information will be able to give you, the responses will be able to share with you. So please be as candid as possible and as honest as possible. We have a stellar, incredible panel for you after Esther will do her session. So please stay and do ask your questions. We'll have people with their experiences that will be able to address your questions. And we're giving you an hour and a half to ask your questions with the panel. So please do come back. Is the code. We are not seeing the QR code. But it'll be up there. We'll also, once the QR code has gone up, we will play one of the videos for one of our panelists who will be coming up here, and he's called Sunday, and he has a great testimony for us. Geographically, washrooms are down this way, so please access them as you need to. Asanteni sana, and see you back in 15.
Let me start as to how I've got to here today. I've been coming to Karura Church for many years, and one day there was a sermon by the preacher of the day, and they talked about stepping out and going out, stopping being a backbencher. So I said to myself, I've been coming to church for over 40 years, and I just come to the sermon, and after the sermon is over, I take off in my car. So I approached Bishop Gary, and I told him, I would like to, I'd like to go to a mission. Anyway, one day he called me and told me, I have thought about it, and I want to put you in the prisons and rehab mission. Now my brothers, let me tell you, the word prisons really scares me. So I got a call from Pastor Fred, and he told me, look, the rehab mission is open. So we went for this service. We go to the retreat in Red Hill, and to my delight, I found, just very normal people. From all the movies that we have seen, when you think about a rehab, you think about mad people and the rest, So actually, that is what I was fearing. But I got there and I realized, the rehab is just, like a normal place, a normal hospital with normal people. And then there was a book that they're doing called Journey to Freedom. So, that was part. So I asked, so I got a copy. Then I started, to read this book. It was during the reading of this book that I realized that I have a problem with alcohol. I admitted to myself, at first, when I was reading the book at the beginning, I was in total denial. I have no problem, I drink. But then the more I read the book, I realized, yes, I do have a problem with alcohol. So being very smart, I called myself a functioning alcoholic. Then I started to realize that the people at the rehab, they are just one step away from me. I'm very near there. And most people, they go over the tipping point, mostly, when you have a calamity in your life, you lose work, a death of somebody, a divorce, whatever. The first step for me was now being aware. So I started looking at the amount of alcohol I drank, and I realized, my God, it is really a lot. But then there's one day that I went down on my knees and I asked God, please help me. And, remarkably enough, actually, I stopped. That's when I also gave my life to Christ. So it's still a journey. We're still struggling with it. But now I'm able to empathize with the people at the rehabs. I go there every Sunday. How has my life changed since this? Of course, by becoming, a born-again Christian, my life has changed a lot drastically. But in terms of my addiction, I'm definitely at peace with myself. I'm no longer having to look at the clock at 5 o'clock, to try and look for an excuse to go to have a drink with friends and the rest. I'm definitely a better father and, husband to my wife. I have an inner peace with myself. And then because I'm still doing this work at the rehab, I have now found a mission in life. I realize, that all my life before that, everything was all about I went to school for myself, I was working for myself. But now I find that, I'm giving back something to to society. And that really makes me very, very, very happy. What can I say about addiction? I think for me is to first of all know that, yes, you are capable of killing this addiction. Whatever addiction it is. But one, I can tell you that you have to, without God, it will be almost impossible. Some people try, but the majority who succeed, that I've seen, are the ones who accept God. It's a journey. It's not going to be easy, And one thing I also learned during my journey was that I used to believe that I can only come to God when I am 100% perfect. So I was waiting for the year when I get to 90 years old, where I'll say my last prayer and go to heaven. But I realized no, I had misread the Bible. The Bible, in fact, is made for us, people who are sinners, to go to God, and He makes us clean. So for me, I just tell, everybody who has an addiction, seek help, acknowledge that you have a problem, and cry out to God. And I also urge the family members of people who have addiction to understand that it is a sickness, at that stage. So they have to learn, how to treat them, and they require themselves to change, and also the support of the people they love. Let me start as to how I've got to here today. I've been coming to Karura Church for many years, and one day there was a sermon by the preacher of the day, and they talked about stepping out and going out, stopping being a backbencher.
I started drinking when I finished high school, when I went to campus, the usual campus, people party, people go out. To me, it was not a big deal because I have my job, I have my money, I'm not disturbing anybody, and so it continued. But it spiraled it went on, and now I know that alcoholism is progressive, so it just gets worse and worse over time. And my biggest trigger now later in life, I think, is when the drinking got worse was when my husband passed away. And when he passed away, our daughter was only 2 years old. And that was a really, really dark time. I did not know how to deal with my grief. And so during that time, which was a very long time, about 5 years, I just drank. I would do some work here and there, have money, live, be able to survive, and continue drinking. It reached a point where I started having blackouts. We're talking about blackouts of losing days. So on this occasion, I knew it was a Monday, and when I'm coming to, I'm being told it's a Thursday or a Friday, and I'm wondering, what just happened? What do you mean today is Thursday? I found myself calling my sister, and my sister picked up the phone. I had not talked to her for a very long time. It was on and off, and probably by then people were already done with me. You see my number calling, you don't pick it up. And so for me to call and for her to pick up my call, I was very grateful that she did. And I couldn't start explaining what was going on. All I told her is, please help me. Please help me. This is now, I think the alcohol is too much now. Get me a rehab. And even when I said get me a rehab, it's not like I knew what a rehab does. In my mind, I knew that this rehab is going to do a checkup on me and tell me, take this medication, and now you can be able to drink like a normal person and have 2 drinks and go home. But when they told me, no, it doesn't work that way, you have to stop completely. Yeah, alcoholism is a disease. In that rehab, I also got to know that I was using alcohol to numb some underlying issue. And for me, it was the grief. I think honestly, in the height of addiction, I would have said I should have just been able to try and get help, ask for help. Instead of getting angry, my counselor told me, when you get out there, you must go out and and be with people like yourself, their support groups, and just take it one day at a time, and remember to pray. A cousin-in-law of mine told me, there's a very nice church around Ruaka, because I came and I started living in Ruaka after I sobered up, and it's called Karura. So I came, and funny enough, the sermon on that day was on restoration or something like that. So I felt like the pastor was speaking to me, like I'm in the right place. I'm going to be okay. There's the denial part where someone feels that an alcoholic is the guy you'll find in the ditch, in the gutter, dirty and everything. But they are also functioning alcoholics. Someone who has a very good job, you see them even in church, you see them everywhere, and they look very respectable and everything. You can't imagine that they are struggling. But when they get to their house, to their room, or they have a little bottle in their bag, they are struggling just like I struggled, but in a different way. For me, I just say, if that person who's struggling has not yet died, no matter how bad or hard they have, where they've reached, there is still hope for them. And all we need to do is show them love and guide them on how they're going to get the help. Otherwise, it is a fatal disease. To drink is to die when you have reached that level of you're dependent on it. There's no other route. And so before they die, why can't we help them and show them that they can get help?
Let me start as to how I've got to here today. I've been coming to Karura Church for many years, and one day there was a sermon by the preacher of the day, and they talked about stepping out and going out, stopping being a backbencher. So I said to myself, I've been coming to church for over 40 years, and I just come to the sermon, and after the sermon is over, I take off in my car. So I approached Bishop Gary, and I told him, I would like to, I'd like to go to a mission. Anyway, one day he called me and told me, I have thought about it, and I want to put you in the prisons and rehab mission. Now my brothers, let me tell you, the word prisons really scares me. So I got a call from Pastor Fred, and he told me, look, the rehab mission is open. So we went for this service. We go to the retreat in Red Hill, and to my delight, I found, just very normal people. From all the movies that we have seen, when you think about a rehab, you think about mad people and the rest, So actually, that is what I was fearing. But I got there and I realized, the rehab is just, like a normal place, a normal hospital with normal people. And then there was a book that they're doing called Journey to Freedom. So, that was part. So I asked, so I got a copy. Then I started, to read this book. It was during the reading of this book that I realized that I have a problem with alcohol. I admitted to myself, at first, when I was reading the book at the beginning, I was in total denial. I have no problem, I drink. But then the more I read the book, I realized, yes, I do have a problem with alcohol. So being very smart, I called myself a functioning alcoholic. Then I started to realize that the people at the rehab, they are just one step away from me. I'm very near there. And most people, they go over the tipping point, mostly, when you have a calamity in your life, you lose work, a death of somebody, a divorce, whatever. So the first step for me was now being aware. So I started looking at the amount of alcohol I drank, and I realized, my God, it is really a lot. But then there's one day that I went down on my knees and I asked God, please help me. And, remarkably enough, actually, I stopped. That's when I also gave my life to Christ. So it's still a journey. We're still struggling with it. But now I'm able to empathize with the people at the rehabs. I go there every Sunday. How has my life changed since this? Of course, by becoming, a born-again Christian, my life has changed a lot drastically. But in terms of my addiction, I'm definitely at peace with myself. I'm no longer having to look at the clock at 5 o'clock, you know, to try and look for an excuse to go to have a drink with friends and the rest. I'm definitely a better father and, you know, husband to my wife. I have an inner peace with myself. And then because I'm still doing this work at the rehab, I have now found a mission in life. I realized, you know, that all my life before that, everything was all about you know, I went to school for myself, you know, I was working for myself. But now I find that, you know, I'm giving back something to society. And that really makes me very, very, very happy. What can I say about addiction? I think for me is to first of all know that, yes, you are capable of killing this addiction. Whatever addiction it is. But one, I can tell you that you have to, without God, it will be almost impossible. Some people try, but the majority who succeed, you know, that I've seen are the ones who accept God. It's a journey. It's not going to be easy, you know. And one thing I also learned during my journey was that I used to believe that I can only come to God when I am 100% perfect. So I was waiting for the year when I get to 90 years old, where I'll say my last prayer and go to heaven. But I realized, no, you know, I had misread the Bible. You know, the Bible, in fact, is made for us, people who are sinners, to go to God, you know, and He makes us clean. So for me, I just tell, you know, everybody who has an addiction, seek help, acknowledge that you have a problem, and cry out to God. And I also urge the family members of people who have addiction to understand that it is a sickness, you know, at that stage. So they have to learn, you know, how to treat them, and they require themselves to change, and also the support of the people they love.
My name is Sunday Ndunguru Kapresi. I'm Tanzanian, 43 years old, father of 3, lawyer by training, business development manager by expertise, and now an addiction recovery support coach, mental health advocate, wellness and fitness professional. My background is very simple, simple but complicated. 2020, I lost my father, unaware that I was grieving. Over the following 2 years, a lot of issues came to the surface. My journey with addiction, there were 3. Emotionally eating. 2, I had a really bad chronic substance use disorder, and my drug of choice was cocaine. Alcohol was something I'd been drinking since I turned legal, which was 18. I was unaware that it was a problem. All I can tell you from 2020 to 2022 was my relationship at the time to the mother of my 2 younger kids was in the ICU. We're always fighting. 2, I remember being quite restless, not being able to focus, breaking people's promises to people, to myself. I developed a really bad sleeping or lack of sleep disorder, which was later diagnosed as insomnia. So I could go 3-4 days without sleeping. I think the cracks started to show. People around me, family and friends, started to notice that I was late for many appointments. I couldn't quite settle. I was very restless. I started isolating a lot more. My partner at the time, I think, was the first to intervene and organize an intervention with my sister, a very good friend. As tough as that conversation was, I think that was the beginning of contemplating that I needed help. What came out of that conversation was them informing my mother. I got to find all this out when I checked into rehab at Chiromo, and we did psychological tests, psychometric tests, personality tests, anxiety, depression, suicide, and I scored an A, figuratively speaking, on ADHD, and that for me was the turning point. I didn't know you could grieve losing a job. The end of my relationship. We're together 8 years, we had a lot of plans. Excuse me. I didn't know I could be grieving that. My faith was restored in rehab. I remember the exact day, 2 weeks into my rehab journey. I always go with this one quote: God will destroy your plans when He sees that your plans will destroy you. I had my first lapse 13 months after rehab. and a lapse is a mistake. But then 2-3 weeks into that binge, I realized, wait, why am I doing all of this? And what triggered at that moment was a place. I went to a place to just relax, and it triggered because I used to drink there. I used to do substances there. So I learned how to avoid certain places. Recovery for me, now here I am in my 3rd year. I'm in Nairobi. I'm studying addiction treatment sciences at Kenyatta University, postgraduate course. I'm volunteering at about 5 rehab facilities, working in one, helping other people who were in my situation. So I'd say right now, on the 3rd year anniversary of me getting help, I think I'm doing much better. I'm living amongst people that I can relate to. I needed that help. I needed that community. And here I am, going to church almost every Sunday, but deeply rooted in service. And I have to thank Karura Community Chapel because they sent their members, parishioners, to visit us in rehab every Thursday and every Sunday. Very normal people who came to eat with us, pray with us, learn from us, treat us as decent human beings. And that triggered my love of service. We go to church, we show up, we dress well, we pay our bills, and that is what I call functional addiction. Very difficult to convince those people. I was one of them to get help. If you are wanting to be at peace with yourself and others, ask for help. Receive that help, pass it forward. And should people intervene, pressure you, push you, I would say you've been through worse. So give that a go and get that help.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. Please feel free to bring your cup of tea with you or your snack so that we can get going. I'm really, really excited for Esther to come and speak with us. Esther is a member of our church, and she's going to be sharing her journey. I think I can't even see her. Esther. Oh, there she is. Don't trip. She's here as a church member, and she'll be sharing part of her journey with us and how the journey of hope and recovery has really, what that has meant to her family. And then after about an hour of her speaking with us, we will open up for our panelists. We are actually going to have 9 panelists today. So please have your questions. We'll have Esther and Maggie and David, who have been a part of AA, and we have an AA that meets at our church. We'll have somebody from Al-Anon, and Al-Anon is for family members of somebody who has an addiction. We'll have Sunday Albert, Pastor Fred, Dr. Judy Mutahi, and I want to say Douglas, a gentleman from the Retreat Rehab, who will all come up and will be able to take your questions. I also want to thank you so much. We are seeing lots of people who are joining us online. Congratulations and thank you for joining us. Please sambaza the videos. Remember, it's a resource that will be here in perpetuity for us. And we have a special guest from Uganda who's come all the way. She runs youth church there and teen church and has come to join us. So thank you very much for traveling all the way. We truly appreciate it. So without much ado, I want to just invite Esther. I met her 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago, and was so excited to just connect with her because she has such a depth of experience and knowledge. So I'll let her introduce herself and give us her journey of hope and recovery. Thank you so much, Esther Olo. Karibu sana.
Thanks, Koi. Morning, church. God is good, and all the time, and that's his nature. My name is Esther. I'm so grateful to be here again to talk about these issues of addiction, alcoholism, and all that. I'm a member of this church, as Koi said, and I became a member by virtue of walking this journey. So I'm going to, I'm going to talk about my journey, but in relation to how it started and the help I have gotten, or the support, or what I've used to still be sober today. I will be 13 years sober next month. And it's really by the grace of God. Sometimes I look back and say, it's a bit hard to believe, because you remember how hard and how dark or how horrible it was before I got help. So for me, just as Albert was sharing about the sense of alcoholism being a disease, all those things he talked about, I went through all of them. Whether it was the physical side, the blackouts, the tremors, and even looking and wondering for myself what was happening with me. I started drinking when I was 18, when we finished high school. I'm of the old school. And we were feeling that you turn 18, you get an ID, you have all the right to drink, nobody should ask you. But of course, not knowing that many, many years later, I'd be right here I'll be somewhere asking for help. I won't focus so much on what really happened, but all that progression, and you start drinking because it's a fun thing, everyone is doing it, you're in campus, you finish campus, you get a good job, you have money, you have no responsibility. What do you do over a weekend? You drink. And it goes on like that until at some point, I cross the line of now I'm dependent on it. But for me, the biggest trigger was when my husband passed away, and our daughter was only 2 years old. And I think, as Albert was saying, in women, perhaps the steep is very fast. And that's really what happened. And I drank for another 5 years. I can't really quite remember those 5 years very well, but everything that I did was centered around the alcohol, trying to cope with the grief, trying to cope with how am I going to be a single mother, how will I take care of my child. I couldn't focus. All those things were just so confusing that it was easier to just drink and tomorrow is another day, we'll figure it out. But in the process, it just became worse and worse and worse until I hit rock bottom when I lost everything. And when I say I lost everything, I lost everything. Work, home, child, everything. And so the only thing I could do was, at that point, say, God help me. And the next thing I knew, I'm calling my sister to ask her for help. And I got the help, thank God. She picked the phone because she never used to pick the phone. And she said, yeah, I will get you into a rehab. So for me, my first way of understanding what was wrong or what I was going through was when I went to that rehab, and understanding that it's a disease, and understanding, I think what I've learned also, sometimes when I was going there, I really didn't know what it was all about. I didn't know what they were going to do with me. But getting that sense of it's a disease, and that there's hope, and that there's help, gave me a sense of peace. Like, let me just stay here for these 90 days. Whatever they tell me to do, I shall do, because really, I've reached the end of my rope, and life cannot go on like this. It's a total mess. So I was glad I was willing to be in that rehab to get help. And they told me that I was also spiritually sick. All my life always revolved around alcohol. And so I needed to change my perspective. And they were using the 12-step program, which also helped and introduced me to AA, which I'll talk about later. And basically just understanding that I could never quite understand why with all the effort I have done on a morning and said, today for sure, Esther, you are not going to drink. I will only take one. And then I take one, but that story ends because there'll be many others that follow. I never understood the craving, what happens, and it's so nice that Albert has explained it, because most of us don't understand that disease side of it. Because there's always the thing, people ask me, oh, Esther, you sobered up. Why is it my daughter stopped and she has relapsed? Why can't she just stop? It's not as easy of just saying, why can't she just stop? Yeah, there's more to it, as we have learned in the last weekend and today. So for me, I took what I was taught in that rehab very well and said, it's a matter of life and death. If I really love my child, honestly speaking, I need to do something about what is going on. So I finished the 90 days. And when I left the rehab, I was being told, the counselor told me, pray. So I'm saying, okay, the last time I was in church was probably when I go for a wedding or for a funeral. So what am I going to pray? He said, you've already been taught some prayers while you are here. All you need to do is to pray in the morning and pray in the evening. And even during the day if you can. So I literally took that and said, every morning I'll be saying a prayer. Dear God, please let me not pick up. At the end of the day, thank you, God, I did not pick up. It was as simple as that. But then there's also the spiritual saying that was spiritually sick, meaning that I needed to get a sense of a higher power or a God of my understanding. And being a Christian, I then said, I think for me, the natural thing, I grew up Christian, is to go to church. And so my cousin, who was always working with me while I was in rehab and encouraging me, told me, if you live in Raka, there's a nice church called Karura. So I said, okay, fine. So this Sunday I come to Karura, and my main aim of Karura was to say a simple prayer to God. First of all, to just say, thank you, I'm sober. Never knew I could be sober for 90 days. And please, whatever you did for me in 90 days, dear God, please continue doing it. I guess he had my prayer. I'm still here today, sober. And so, having understood the spiritual side of the program, even when I'll talk about AA, it's really that you come to a place where you have to seek God. At the end of the day, when you sorted out the other issues, because I believe for me, with the alcoholism, the underlying issue was the not being able to deal with grief, not having the resources or understanding that that was an underlying problem, and maybe many other family issues. And once I've sorted the underlying issues, and I'm able to now say I don't need to use alcohol to deal with my issues. And we have different issues. There's always some underlying issue that makes us reach the place of alcoholism. So when I came to Karura, that is how I came to Karura. I remember Angela very well. I was at the visitor's tent. You write your name, and the next week, Angela is calling me. And I'm like, hey, this church is strange. They call you to say you come back. So I said, okay. The call was very nice, and I came back. And when I came back, the other thing that has helped me over the years, and this is why we are also doing this, to see how does church support this journey of recovery. And I started doing the church programs. And I remember the first one that I really did, of course, there's the plug-in, but there was one, Freedom in Christ. I'm glad Judith is here. And I remember Judith meeting me, and I'm saying, this program, I think, is speaking to me. I don't know what I'll get out of it. But I did Freedom in Christ, and it gave me so much sense of who I was. Yes, I'm coming to church. Yes, I've sobered up. But the problem is, again, also, when you stop drinking, it's not the issue that you've stopped drinking. It's how you're going to stay stopped. How are you going to get that support to continue not to drink again? And so that program really helped me, and I think she's going to talk a little bit about it. And those who are in the 12-step program, there are places where we're supposed to we are supposed to look at the damage we did when we were drinking and be able to come up with a way that we can make amends to the people we harmed or hurt in our drinking. And that freedom in Christ really helped me in doing that. So why I'm also talking about it is that, again, people can recover in different ways. You can come to church, you can go to rehab, you go to AA, but at the end of the day, you need the support. I need to be with people who are like myself, so that now when I'm sharing about my journey, it's not very strange what I'm going through, because I can hear somebody else who's gone through the same experience and get hope that I'll be okay. I'm still only 6 months sober, 1 year sober. I don't know what's going to happen the following week. But when I'm with people like myself, I just know I'm okay for today. It's always one day at a time and tomorrow. And bringing the sense of trusting God. In AA, they say you, higher power or God of your understanding. And for me, God of my understanding is as a Christian. And so that really helped me to say, okay, fine, I have found a church. And the other thing I needed to find was the support group of people like myself, hence the AA, to be able to say now, yes, I'm on this journey of recovery, but I'm getting the support I need to continue staying sober one day at a time. So doing the FIC, the program I was taken through also talks about prayer. So in the beginning, I'm only saying this 3-word, 4-word, 1-sentence prayers. I need to understand really more about prayer. And Karura has a program on OMBI. So I said, let me do OMBI. And OMBI really helped me to be able to understand how can I be able to continue praying and trusting God on this journey that I am. And you know, it's always so scary because when you've been through this, there's always the fear that I'm going to relapse. What I can say is I got help through rehab, but rehab brought me back to start building a relationship with God, which meant I needed to be connected to a church community, which is Karura. But also, in addition, I needed to also be connected with people who are like me, hence now having AA. And having been in Karura all these years, at least we started at that time. I remember sharing my story with Pastor Evans and telling him how rehabs on Sundays, I don't think there's church or anything. And I'm talking to people and saying, how at the end of the day, I trust it's about letting go and letting God, and it's one day at a time and just trying to be dependent on God. And the guy asked me, how can you be telling us that in rehab and we have no sense of God? So we started taking Karura services to rehabs, went to Jogs retreat, and I think now there's a whole rehab ministry just to help people. Yes, you're getting help, but when you get out again, you have this sense that, what can I do? Maybe I'll just go to church and see this part of understanding how God actually is part of this journey. And then, of course, after that, there are many other programs. Then I also asked, perhaps we should have an AA meeting at Karura. So the AA meeting started in 2018 or 2019, thereabouts, just before COVID. And is still there today. We meet on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 7:30. So that's really my journey in brief, but I want to talk more about AA, and I'll keep mentioning a bit of my journey as we go along. So what is Alcoholics Anonymous? Personally, when I heard about AA, the only thing I knew is when I watch a movie and there are some people seated in a circle, I don't know what they are talking about, that is AA, that's what I knew. I didn't even know it existed in Kenya. By the time I'm getting out of rehab and being told here is a list of meetings, I was pleasantly surprised. So AA was started in 1935 by Bill Wilson, who was a stockbroker struggling with alcoholism, and Dr. Bob Smith in the US. So there's a book that we use when you join AA to help you in your journey of recovery. And I remember in rehab, I was given that book. And then for me, I'm a bit of an academic intellectual. I want 1 + 1 to be 2. why is it like that? Don't start telling me a different story. So when they gave me the book, I was looking at this guy and saying, how can you tell me that this book is going to help me? I'm struggling. If you know all the problems I have, please. So I took the book that is used by AA to discredit it. I was going to read and say, it's not working, this is wrong. But when I started reading the book, it was actually talking about me. And in the beginning of the book is really a lot about what Albert was saying, to understand what alcoholism is all about, and after that is, what is the solution? So in my head at some point I said, they did this in 1935. This is 2012. Why is Esther being ridiculous to say that they are wrong and I need help? So I at that point I turned and I said, fine, I think they know what they're talking about. So AA is really a fellowship of people and individuals who are just seeking sobriety. You may have come out of rehab, or you may have come straight to AA to get to help you to sober up and to stay sober. And all the focus is really about sharing our experiences and supporting each other on the journey. I remember my first AA meeting, I go and it's a speaker meeting. A speaker meeting means you listen to the members share and their journey. And this guy was 40 years sober. So I'm asking myself, I'm 6 months sober. How this 40 years is still coming to AA? There must be some hope here. Yeah? And so it's really about sharing experiences and supporting each other. The best way to even explain about it is something we read in every meeting, that AA is a fellowship of people, or men and women, who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem, alcoholism, and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no fees, there's nothing to pay, you just come for a meeting. And at the end of it all, our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And that's why we are able to come to things like this and share our experiences, because we want to help somebody else to achieve sobriety. So it's a worldwide fellowship. It is in many countries around the world, and thanks to the pandemic, AA grew because people could go to online meetings. Because of the nature of what we are talking about, you may tell somebody to go to a physical meeting, but they don't want to be seen that they are going to the physical meeting. But now you can go to an online meeting. You don't have to show your face. You can write a different name down there. Doesn't really matter, but you will still be able to engage and get and to understand how this AA is going to help you. So it offers help to anyone with a drinking problem. And really, the program is the 12 steps. And the 12 steps that we're talking about, actually, I think in 6 or 7 of the steps, there's the word God in them. And we start a meeting with a prayer and end the meeting with a prayer. The 12 steps are really a way to help you to stay sober. From the beginning, where you're admitting that, yes, I've surrendered, I need help, my life is a mess, and up to the point where you need to look at how it was when you're drinking, the damage you did, being able to come to a place where you can go back to your family or people and ask for forgiveness, and continue to pray and continue. And the last step is to do service, just the way we are doing service right now, helping other people. Because in my mind, I might say, I'm 12 years sober, I don't need this, I'm okay. But that's not true. I'm not okay. If I take a drink today, right now, I'll be back where I was 12 years ago, and the decline will be steeper, and it's been known many people can relapse, and it's so fast and you die. Because for us, to drink is to die. So the sense of service also helps. So that's in general what the 12 steps are. What are the AA? Sorry, how does AA help the alcoholic? So through, you tell a member, come to the meeting. It's not complicated. During the meeting, they'll always ask, is there somebody new? and you'll be able to get the help that you need so that you're able to work the 12 steps of the program. And these 12 steps are suggestions. What are AA meetings? We have different types of meetings, but as I said, AA is all around the world. In Kenya, we have 47 groups. We are in many towns now because we always carry out what we call public information sessions where we tell people about AA like I'm doing right now. And so that when we do that, in that place we have gone, is to try and start an AA meeting there. In the beginning, meetings were concentrated in Nairobi and then a bit in Mombasa. But now over the years, we are glad that now we are in many other towns, Mombasa, Nakuru, Nyeri, even Loitoktok, Nanyuki, Voi, Limuru, around here. I'll talk about the meetings around here. So each group is to organize what meetings they'll be having, and really is to carry the message to the still suffering alcoholic. And the members will meet maybe once a week to have the meetings. We have 3 types of meetings. Open meetings, which would be relevant to in the context that we are here today. Open meetings, you can come to the meeting. They're intended for alcoholics and non-alcoholics, family members who have loved ones who are struggling. So you come to the meeting so that you can kind of understand how the meeting is structured and how it's done, so that you can go and convince your loved one, please let's go to the meeting. You can actually then come with them in the next open meeting. So for Karura, we have our meeting on Tuesdays, 6:30 to 7:30. We've agreed that the last Tuesday of every month will be an open meeting, so that anyone, even the congregation or anybody else, can attend that meeting just to be able to understand. The other meetings are closed. Closed is only for those who need help, for the alcoholics, those with a problem or have a desire to stop drinking. I've already talked about the online sessions. The other thing of how AA works is sponsorship. So I'm a newcomer. I come to my first meeting, and I only see one other lady, and I'm wondering, will I really come back? But I needed to come back. So how does it work? As you attend the meetings are structured the same all around the world. You get to know people who are always coming to meeting. You get to hear what people are sharing about. And so the goal is for you to identify a sponsor, not the sponsor we are thinking of. A sponsor is somebody who will walk with you. And it's the key element of how the AA program works. I still have a sponsor. The sponsor is to guide you to work those 12 steps. The sponsor is sort of like accountability. Or maybe you're in a bad place. Who do I call? If I call my family members, they have no clue about this alcoholism and anything. But if I call my sponsor, at least they can listen and sort of guide me on what to do. So the sponsor gives guidance, support, and you're sort of accountable to them because you always have sessions with them outside of the meeting, so that you continue working the steps, but you also attend meetings. That's really how the program works. How do you choose a sponsor? You want to be in a meeting and you're hearing somebody share and you're like, I want what they have. They look so together, the way they're sharing, the way they're talking. So after the meeting, you ask them. But we'll always have like lists of sponsors to help people work that program. What does AA not do? It does not run membership drives. We believe in attraction, not promotion. When you see me, someone should be able to ask me, how does it work? It doesn't even look like you are on this journey. And I'll be able to help you because you can see through the way I say or the way I act. It is not a religious organization because you're in the context that alcoholics cannot only be coming from one religion. Alcoholics, it doesn't choose who, whether male, female, religion, no religion, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. So the program is for everyone, but when you're in the program, it is you who decides in your sense that what is your God of your understanding. what about problems other than alcohol? So because the 12-step program has worked for alcoholics, we have now, the same program has been adapted to deal with other addictions, which I think Albert was talking about. We know there are many other addictions. It's not only alcohol that is the problem. So the 12-step program has been able, there are other 12-step program, but in this context, I think the most important one is the Al-Anon program, which they also use the 12 steps. This is for family and friends of alcoholics. So you have that husband who has a problem, that child who has a problem, that sister who has a problem. And so the program for Al-Anon is for those who have family and friends of alcoholics to help them deal with their situation. How do I deal with this other person whom I care about who's also an alcoholic? And the steps are again very similar. They're still the 12 steps. And so other programs, Albert talked about codependence. They still Codependence Anonymous. Again, those struggling with codependency. There's Gamblers Anonymous. For those who are struggling, we know how gambling has become an addiction. There's now even Gamblers Anonymous to help those who are trying to stop. There is Overeaters Anonymous. So all these 12-step programs are there. But what is the common theme of all the programs? Community. You are with someone who's like you. If I'm gambling, I am in this program with other gamblers. Yeah? And we're able to work together to be able to help each other to stop gambling. So there's that community support. You have a sense of belonging because you are all walking the same journey. We're in AA because we're all walking the same journey. There's no difference between us. Then the other common theme among the programs is spiritual growth. The sense of having a higher power, God of your understanding, to remove you from what you're dependent on. So I was dependent on alcohol. I've removed it from the picture. What can I depend on now? I can only depend on God. Personal responsibility, because you're working with other people who are walking the same journey. So it's easy to do it together. So all the programs that we're talking about in terms of 12 steps is really to help that specific addiction, but they really follow the same journey. I hope I have been able to at least, I know for me, there's always a sense, especially being a mother, of trying to reach out to that person who is saying, how do I even start saying I have a problem? Or women in general, there's already a stigma in itself to say that you're in this journey, but then again, how do I ask for help? And there's also the sense of, there's a lot of, from what I have seen and in this journey, there's a lot of women struggling in the closet, so to speak. So you see, they're looking very together, job is there, their family looks okay, no troubles. We have this perception that an alcoholic is the one at the ditch, dirty, singing crazy songs because they're drunk. No, we also have a lot of functioning alcoholics. So I'll still go to work. In my handbag, I have a little bottle. Lunchtime, I go, I take a little bit. Or the minute I get home, I go to my room, lock, and I finish many cartons of wine. It's still the same problem, whichever way you look at it. So for me, I hope that I've been able to, at least the main message is, despite all that, there's hope. There's a solution. Whether you're going to rehab, whether you'll come and connect with AA, whether you'll also connect and be in church or not be in church, but there's a solution. All is not lost. No matter how hard it is, they are still alive. All they need from us is to tell them there is help. Let us help you. Let us not stigmatize people. Let us not hate them or be angry all the time. They just need to get help like we all did. So I'm going to ask, she's there. Okay. So I'm going to ask David to share from the point of view of Al-Anon briefly how the Al-Anon program works. I will also followed by Maggie to share also. She's there. Al-Anon is last. Okay, so we'll have David and then Maggie and Al-Anon so that they're able to give their experience to say the way we can help when it comes to recovery.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you so much. May the Lord bless you. As David is coming, you will see on our screen, joinmenti.com. Mentimeter is the place, the app that you can use to ask your questions anonymously. The code is there. If you just type into your Apple Store or whatever you use to get the app, Mentimeter, and then put that code, you'll see the questions that we're asking. First, we have asked, what was your big takeaway from the training so far? But we can also get that information. We'll do a survey at the end. But start to put in your questions while David, Maggie, and Al-Anon do their thing. And then please forgive me, Senior Executive Pastor, Reverend Shiramba. George Shiramba is here with his wife. Thank you so much for supporting the ministry. One of the things I love about our church is they have the if you smell the diaper, you change it policy. So when we went to the church and said, nobody's talking about mental health and families, they said, okay, simuanze basi. But they've been 100% supportive, and I'm also very grateful because they're in our CLG, and our CLG has been standing with us. Thank you very much, David. So go ahead and ask your questions.
Hi, my name is David, and I'm an alcoholic. So, sorry, a bit of a confusion. I'm also in Al-Anon, but I'm also an alcoholic. But today it's my alcoholic hat that's on. The Al-Anons are also here, so they're going to do their share later. So, for me, I come to you guys from a position of weakness. Today I'm quite tired. A lot has been happening, but part of it is my fault. So it's life also, you know. Sometimes I like to beat myself up that, hey, you know, I need to take better care of myself. I need to put in 8 hours of sleep. I've never been able to do that. I do 7 maybe max, or 7.5. You know, and hit the gym, do some exercise, eat healthy. So right now I'm on my own case about that kind of stuff. Yeah, so, but that said, the place where God found me, so in AA we say higher power. So we just mean a power greater than yourself. In other words, not you, because you cannot be greater than yourself. So whether you want your power to be the ocean, you know, but you just acknowledge that it is not you. You lack the power, or I lack the power to run my own life and stop myself drinking, right? So for me, I am powerless over alcohol. I have tried to get control and power over the alcohol, but I failed miserably. So, so my upbringing, maybe middle-classish kind of. I was in St. Mary's for many years. Then I went to do my Form 5 and 6 in the UK. So I came from a background where everything was looked after and taken care of in terms of bills, tennis lessons, whatever, tuition, extra tuition, food. I don't have those stories of lack or want in any way, shape, or form. But what was lacking in the house, and this is not the reason for alcoholism, because I believe in alcoholism is something very individual, and there's many reasons one could be an alcoholic. I'll leave that to the experts like Albert, you know. But for me, they say, if a donkey is in a well, don't try and figure out why is the donkey in the well. Get the donkey out of the well, right? So for me, what I distinctly remember about my growing up is I did not feel a deep sense of love, right? My mom was loving, yes, but she used to work a lot, so we barely used to see her. So many nights we'd sleep without seeing her at all. My dad even was barely there, but even when he was there, I don't want to say he's an African man, but I guess he's an African man, He gets home, he doesn't even acknowledge or say hi to you, sits, then he just keeps quiet by himself, then he's like, sorry, my middle name is Wine, they call me Wine. He's like, Wine, get me the remote. And the remote is like, here, And I'm like, man, he doesn't ask me, how's your day? In fact, I first started seeing those things like on the Cosby Show. Like, what? The family is like, what? How's your day? How are you feeling? What are your issues in school? Like, wow, man, that's American stuff, right? So I do remember, I just felt like a vacuum. And then my dad was also an alcoholic, so you have to walk around the house on eggshells. So I just really didn't feel a sense of security growing up. And I felt like a bit rejected. And I grew up a really shy person, right? Anyway, so fast forward, I'm in high school, I'm in the UK. We're starting to drink. And unfortunately, UK culture is binge drinking culture. So it's not like let's go and have a few sips. It's like let's go and down bottles and then run back up before the teachers realize what we've done, and then go and pretend that we just had one beer, but we're really drunk, So I got into that kind of drinking culture. And, for me, I was doing it, I think at the time, to people please. What I really got out of alcohol initially was that I felt a sense of connection with people. Because naturally I was really shy, but the minute I drink, I'd kind of feel like, wow, like Michael Jackson, let's make the world a better place, It's for you and for me, And I'd feel like hugging everybody and talking to everyone and a deep connection. And I'm like, wow, man, these guys are all like my brothers and, And I love that connection, right? And then I could talk to people. So I wasn't awkward. I could talk to girls. I could talk to dudes, make jokes. So that's what alcohol did for me. It gave me power to connect with others. So the problem is that alcohol is very insidious. So it started that way. But over time, as much as it was giving me power, in the background it was taking power, right? And that's where the problem began. And with my level of naivety, I would not be able to see that. I could not see that, right? So it started off as something, a solution, but ended up as a problem. So by the end of it, I was a slave to alcohol. So I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I'm not going to drink today. I don't like what happened yesterday. I can't even remember what happened yesterday. I really used to hate that, by the way. Just imagine just thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do yesterday? And then you walk around and people are like, do you remember what you did yesterday? I'm like, oh man, I don't even remember, but I just know it's bad if you're laughing like that, So, yeah, so I kind of felt, a sense of, I started to realize that I don't have any control or power over this, the disease. I didn't even know it was a disease. I just thought that God had manufactured me, forgive me, pastors, reverends, that I felt that God had manufactured me wrong, He had made one error. All you other guys are okay, but small manufacturing defect, right, in me, right? So that's the only solution I could come up with, right? Because I want to do the right thing and I'm not doing the right thing, But if you really go back in Christianity, you'll see in the Bible, there's a part Paul talks about, that I want to do something and what I want to do, I don't do, and what I do, I don't want to do, right? So it's something that God knows about, right? So anyway, downhill, I get into depression, mental illness, downhill, not knowing, what to do with my life. I couldn't control my life. My life was heading nowhere. I grew up wanting to do a lot, right? I remember a lot of people telling me, my cousins, even policemen that had arrested us, that, hey, dude, you'll be, the way you talk and behave, you'll be the president of Kenya one day, right? So that's the potential I displayed to people, right? But this alcohol, it just kept taking and taking. So even that potential, it took, right? So eventually it left me with nothing, no hopes, no dreams. My dad was about to kick me out of the house. I was going to be homeless. And as I told you, I was cushioned, so I'm not streetwise at all. I didn't even know where to start. I didn't even have a beginning plan, zero. Maybe I'd have just slept outside the gate at home, I don't know, right? Anyway, so one day, it got too much for me. The mental anguish, the depression, you know, the lack of power, the look my mom used to give me of contempt. My friends would just not really talk to me. It was such a bad rock bottom that I'll never ever forget. And one day I just said, hey, you know, I realized, wow, I've failed. You know, I've literally failed my life. And the worst part was, all of that potential, I could see that light at the end of the tunnel flickering. And that scared me so much. Like, I might die and never achieve what I thought I'll always achieve. And I knew somewhere deep down that I'd never see 30 at the rate I was going, right? So I just said, hey, you know, I've failed, and I told God, look after me, right? So through a series of events that some guys might say it's serendipitous, others might just say it's God listening to me finally when I was sincere. Like 3 weeks later, I was in Cape Town, in a rehab in Cape Town. And that's been my journey, and that was like a good 20 years ago, more than 20 years now. So I think for me, I have done my research, and I'm happy with my rock bottom, and I don't need to do any more research, you know? So anytime I even feel like I don't want to go for a meeting, I just remember my rock bottom, and I'm like, yo, you know? I better just go for that meeting, even if I'm feeling lazy today. And that's been my inspiration to be who I am and where I am. And if you'll allow me just one extra minute, please. So for me, what I've got out of recovery is I've gotten back a connection with God, because I had become very bitter to God, because you know, I got saved when I was 13, you know, and I was like, God, I've been following you, and this has all happened, and now, whether I like it or not, it's like I'm following all the things from the Bible that the guys wouldn't inherit the kingdom of God, you know. So I was very sad. So over time, God has brought me back, and I'm back in church. I do church leadership, a few things here and there. But the thing that God has done most is he's done it in a very loving, kind, gentle way. So I feel as long as I'm bringing willingness to the table, God has done the rest. So for me right now, I'm really, really enjoying my life. My life is filled with laughter, success, and love most of all. So for me, all I have left now in the world is, you know, to just follow God, be with God, and, you know, look after his children and be part of life. And just try and echo God, because, you know, God is love. So whatever I try and do, I just try and echo and just be love also. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Maggie, and I'm very nervous and anxious. One, because this is my home church, and I never thought that I'll be able to stand here and say my story. I love being in the background, but when the church announced this campaign, I was like, okay, charity starts at home, and that's why I'm here. So, like I've said, my name is Maggie, and I'm an alcoholic. And I first heard the name alcoholic 7 years ago. And at the time, I was done. I was done with life. I tried everything, and it wasn't working. My childhood is very different. My childhood involves sexual assault. My childhood involves dysfunction, like Albert mentioned. My childhood involves a lot of... My dad is a romantic, a very big romantic. So it also involves a lot of love from both my mom and my dad. And so even with that dysfunction and the abuse, that's not why I became an alcoholic. I became an alcoholic because I don't know. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it that the first time I took a drink at a very young age, that's what I wanted to do. And I knew that I'll do it again. And so after that, I would seek different options and different times to drink. And I loved it. I loved going out to drink because drinking for me was security. I felt safe. And I'd not felt safe in a very long time. I didn't belong. Although among so much love, and my parents tried. My parents are Christians. I grew up in church. I'm from a Catholic background, so I did everything people do. But that was not enough. I never belonged. I felt like something deep inside was very wrong, and I couldn't identify what it was. And so when I drank, all that went away, and there was safety, and there was love, and there was acceptance. And so even growing up, I didn't think I have a life. I didn't dream. And I knew that at some point I'll drink and die. And I wanted to die. I tried committing suicide a couple of times. It didn't work. I was very mad at God. Imagine saying this is the last time, and I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'll wake up in a different place. And then I wake up. That was so disappointing. And so 7 years ago, I was watching a series, and that series was talking about alcoholism. I was like, let me see and try and find if there's something like this in Kenya. And I was so shocked to see their meetings, and I called a number, and someone answered, and they told me, come to a meeting. So I went to the meeting. I found this bunch of people in a circle, laughing, talking about God. I'm seated there, very mad, hopeless, in a dark place. Alcoholism took everything for me. It took joy. It took my family. I couldn't stop drinking because of my son. Then my son was 3 years old. I tried stopping because of him. I was married. I tried stopping because of my marriage. I tried stopping because of my family. I tried stopping because of my health, but I could not. I was going insane, and I felt it. And I tried. I would wake up in the morning and say, today I'm not drinking. And at 5, I'd blacked out. Because I had a job, I'll set my alarm at 3 a.m. in the morning to drink before I go to the job. And I was like, okay, today I'm not. But I'll find myself outside at 2 a.m. trying to look for alcohol. And so I thought I was the only one who was going through this. So when I went to this meeting and people are saying, my name is so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, I was like, what? And I was told that alcoholism is a disease, which I cried 3 months in a meeting because I couldn't believe there's someone else who is like me. I couldn't believe there's someone who has a story, who has my story. And someone gave me a hug, and I cried because I hadn't felt such kind of love in a very long time. And so I was like, okay, I am here. How does this help me stop drinking? Because I tried, and I couldn't go to rehab because my family was done. I'd isolated myself. I'd separated myself from everything. And because I thought I was unique, I was like, okay, I don't need family, I don't need. So I didn't even give my family the chance to help me. I didn't say I need help. So the only thing I remember doing, I went on my knees and was like, okay, God, you have a plan. What's the plan? And I am done. It's either I die or I get sober. So which is which? And I don't know how to get sober. And so at that meeting, me crying for 3 months, and the 3 months I kept being sober. And at this point, I'd not been sober I started drinking when I was 10. I got sober when I was 25, 26. And so you can imagine, my life, all I know is drinking. Like Albert stayed, we hold hostage. So I didn't have friends, I didn't have family. Everyone was away to Amins. And so because of AA, I got my life back. And you can imagine stopping at that age and starting the age that I started. I was like, okay, I'm an adult. I think I realized I'm a mom in recovery. When I went to one meeting with a clear head, I was like, oh my God, I have a 3-year-old. What am I doing with a 3-year-old? Oh my God, I've messed up so much in my life. I've ruined so many people. I've caused so much hurt and so much heartbreak. What am I going to do with all this? And then my sponsor told me, you know what? It's a day at a time. Just come. It's a day at a time. You don't have to deal with everything today. You don't have to cure everything today. Just keep coming back. And I kept going, and I would meet people who are new. I'll be like, okay, this is how we do. And I kept going to meetings, which was very hard. I was like, okay, am I never going to drink again? Imagine yourself at an ocean and you're seeing the sunset. I was like, I can't have a drink? Be like, no. Okay, so when my child gets married, I can't drink? I was like, no. And what about the hard days? When something happens to my child, I can't drink? I was like, no, you can't drink. I was like, okay, I'll still keep coming back, but I don't believe what you are saying. I don't see me going through a hard time without drinking. And believe it or not, I've had some really, really horrible experiences in recovery, where if I drank, no one would have asked me why I drank. Like, I had the airtime to drink without any questions. But I went through them sober. I found myself sitting at a theater room, my son getting surgery, and it was during COVID, so it was lockdown. I was alone in that waiting room for 6 hours, and I didn't drink. All I remember is praying. I'm like, okay, I'm the person who prays. And so in how it works, there's one thing that says that we seek God. And so for me, that brought me to this church. The fact that I needed to seek this power greater than myself brought me here. And then the other thing is service. I found myself doing service in church as a responsible person, as a woman of dignity, which is the words that I couldn't relate with. And so today, standing here, I'm grateful I'm an alcoholic, because being an alcoholic gave me my life back. Being an alcoholic gave me the possibilities that I didn't think I have. And also getting to help the still suffering alcoholics. And so it's by the grace of God, I celebrated 6 years December. Imagine that. I wake up and I just have this beautiful, amazing life. And that's all because I said, I am done. So thank you so much.
Not scary. Hi, everyone. Morning, afternoon. Thank you, Maggie, Esther, David. I missed Albert earlier, but sorry about that. I'm not very good at this, so kindly bear with me. I'm here from the Al-Anon program, which is so the Al-Anon family groups are a fellowship of relatives and friends of alcoholics who share their experience, strength, and hope in order to solve their common problems. We believe that alcoholism is a family illness and that changed attitudes can aid recovery. Al-Anon is not allied with any sect, denomination, political entity, organization, or institution, and it does not engage in any controversy. Al-Anon has but one purpose: to help families of alcoholics. We do this by practicing the 12 steps, by welcoming and giving comfort to families of alcoholics, and to be giving understanding, and by giving understanding and encouragement to the alcoholic. So I've been in Al-Anon for, give or take, 7 years. My husband went into recovery 7.5 years ago. And before that, I didn't know that addiction was a family disease. I just thought it was something he did. I thought he had a choice over drinking. It's only through working the program, meeting people in the program, both programs, and listening to people's stories that I've, and of course working my program, that I've come to understand that he really was powerless over his alcoholism. And that helped me by allowing me to have a bit of compassion for him. Living with alcoholism, I mean, from one side, it's very different. From the family side, it was completely different. And I'd just like to, one of our daily readers had this reading the other day, and I think it would sum up how I felt before I came into Al-Anon. So it goes, who am I? When I came to Al-Anon, I thought I knew the answer to that question. But I discovered that my answers were all out of date because I had long ago stopped asking myself who I was. I could tell you about the alcoholics and everyone else in my life, their likes, dislikes, opinions, feelings, but I had no such answers for myself. Al-Anon gave me the 12 steps with which to rediscover myself, making a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself and sharing it with a trusted friend were especially helpful. It was the first time in a very long time I paid attention to myself. I also learned about myself by listening in meetings. When I identified with others, I gained insight into my own thoughts and feelings. Today I know that I'm a passionate, generous, opinionated, moody, honest, tactful, stubborn person. I know how I feel and what I feel on an assortment of topics, and I'm aware when these thoughts and feelings change. Al-Anon has given me back the only thing that was really mine to keep, myself. So today's reminder, recovery is a wonderful word. It means getting something back. Today I will try to remember that that something is me. So yeah, coming into Al-Anon, I thought I was doing it for my husband. If I worked Al-Anon, maybe he'd get sober. Or if I worked Al-Anon, it would help my children. So that got me into Al-Anon, but I stayed because it was helping me. And it continues to do so. We are powerless over this disease. It is, I love that I'm not a religious person, but I carry God with me, the God of my understanding. And I love that it could allow me to have my own relationship with my higher power. And I sit here and I can attest to the change it's made in our recovery journey for my husband and myself, that I work my program independently of him working his. We do call it a family disease. And, the way I look at it is the whole family's got to heal. So we've also got to be able to look at our role. I never thought that I had a role to play in what was happening in our lives. I thought it was always what he did, and he was drinking, and it was always his thing. And then this program teaches you to actually sit there and take stock of yourself. What was my role in it? Initially the answer was, oh, I had no role in it. But as as humility sets in and as I'm able to look at my role in it, things change. The joy that we've talked about. I had no joy in my life, but I had everything. I had a husband, I had kids, lived in a nice home, my kids went to school, I had a great job, I enjoyed it, but was I happy? Was I at peace? No. I didn't know what peace was. And now I'm learning that my peace is I protect it. I stay away from people, places, things that would trigger it. For us in Al-Anon, when we work the same program. Our program was developed by Bill W.'s wife, Lewis. And in our program, we say we have a thinking disease. So when I first found my sponsor, the first thing she asked me to do was to sit with her and go through the big book, which Esther made reference to as well. And she said, every time you see the word drink, you change it and you read think, because that's the disease that I have. I have a thinking disease. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very grateful. I guess I pass this on.
So you'll sit in the corner with us, they'll bring some chairs. So that will come. Yeah, just sit. Thank you, David. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Pavna. As we finish this part of the session, we just want to say that all these programs we've talked about have given us a new way of life. The way we used to live with our alcoholism and we are better people, we're useful members of society, we do service, we trust in God. And so we hope we've been able to help you understand that if you have that person who maybe left rehab, you don't know what they should do after that, they should come to an AA meeting. If you're a family member who has someone who is struggling, talk to us on how we can help, or even attend that open meeting. So I want to thank Karura, the church, for this opportunity to discuss this, which is not an easy subject. So the meeting at Karura is on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 7:30. Sorry. We also have another AA meeting not far from here, PCEA Evergreen, on Wednesdays from 6:30 to 7:30. We also have another meeting on the side of Kiambu Road at a rehab called Primrose on Saturdays from 11 to 12. And of course, there are online meetings, and we have a website. AA Kenya has a website, so you just log on to AA Kenya, and you'll be able to pick the location, the day, and see what meetings are available. There are many meetings online and physical. Most of the meetings tend to be in a church, but the meetings are structured in the same way. They're not different. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share about AA. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Esther. Don't go far, just find a comfortable seat. Thank you so much for all of you who have been sharing your experience. The Mentimeter site is working, so I'm already seeing questions pouring in. And thank you very much, Bhavna. Thank you so much for coming and for your supportive escort. Thank you so much for coming. The join Mentimeter code is 151-12295, but I'm sure he'll put it back up there. I also want to remember, please, we are still receiving support for the mental health clinic. My husband Kibi mentioned that we are receiving a 40-foot container, but we will need some help with furnishing, and somebody already brought a desk, a chair, we have a couch, we will be needing some carpets. If you have any experience in interior designing and you would like to volunteer that experience, or in fabrication, we would be very, very grateful to receive your help. I want to just again give a big shout out to my CLG, Ujirani CLG. They have been so supportive, and just to give you the M-Pesa, if you're able to send any contribution, it's Karura Community M-Pesa pay bill 532-900, and the account is mental health. So thank you very much. I want to welcome to our stage Esther, Maggie, David, Bhavna from Al-Anon, yes, and Tilda, Sunday, Albert. Now, it's not Sunday, Albert. Sunday is Sunday. Albert is Albert. Pastor Fred, and I think Pastor Judy. Dr. Judy, sorry. Yes. Do we have enough seats for everybody here? Great. I think there's one more. Where do we put Pastor Fred? You'll put him here somewhere. I know we are trying to make a tight circle so that everyone can be seen on the recording. I just want to go through some of the great comments that we've already received through our Mentimeter. Somebody has said, I've learned a lot about accepting my addiction and seeking help, understanding the science of addiction, knowing how to the telltale signs of addicts, and how to assist a person. It's very timely, heartfelt, and accurate. knowing that I am in charge of my mental health and it is okay to seek help, and learning the brain science behind the disease of addiction, and has really opened my eyes to this issue. I want to just read a few questions. We'll have mics here, and I think my able sons will be helping rotate the mic in the congregation. And what we will do is take a few questions. So let me read the questions that we've received online, and we can kind of identify who can take the question. Okay, here we go. The first question is, how do you really help someone who needs help but does not seem to appreciate the fact, and it becomes frustrating to help them? So that's one question maybe from Al-Anon that you can think through. Another question, oopsie, I'm trying to manage this. I'm not as nimble as my children. Another question is, how can one regulate or deal with emotional outbursts and stop overthinking? Maybe Al-Anon or Bhavna, you can deal with that one, especially you've talked about thinking. Another question, I have tried to help my brother for many years, rehabs a few times, but he still relapses. Everyone in the family has given up. This is a question for Albert Muraya. Hello, Albert. Thank you for the session. I have addiction in alcohol and I have tried to stay away for up to 3 months, but relapsed. At the moment, I have both psycho and behavioral effects. How do I deal with it? And I think maybe Sunday you can pick that one because you have a 90-day post-rehab program. And the last question that I currently have is, how do I come out as it's already messing up with my job and my family finances? Maybe Dr. Judy, you can take that one. This is somebody who's now at the realization that, okay, my life's a mess, kind of where many of you have been. So I think if we can take those first few, please raise your hand if you have a question in the congregation, and the gentleman will give you the mic, and we'll take a few more questions, 4 or 5, while I also monitor online. Go ahead. So I think we can start with Tindi and Bhavna, the one of overthinking, or how do I deal with my emotions, and how do I deal with somebody in the family when I'm trying to help, and
all right, now it's on. Hi, everyone. My name's Tilda. I'm both an alcoholic and in recovery and Al-Anon. So I'm what's called a double winner. And the question about thinking actually applies to both alcoholics and those with the family illness that are treated in Al-Anon. Overthinking is something I think a lot of people suffer with, and it's usually fear-based. I've been in recovery from alcohol for 31 years, and I've been in Al-Anon for 4 years. And overthinking, obsessive thinking, we sometimes call it the tumble dry. Your thoughts just go round and round and round, usually at 4 in the morning, unfortunately. But it can be at any time of day. It grips me, and I don't know what to do, or I didn't know what to do. I now know what to do. In the programs of Al-Anon, in the programs of Alcoholics Anonymous, we learn tools. We're not taught by teachers, we're taught by other people who have experienced these things and have learned ways to do life better than picking up a drink. And that's the transformational aspect of recovery programs. You're not being taught by somebody on a podium. Sorry, we're on a podium, but we're with you. We've all been there. You know, we're not on a mountaintop. We're living life. And so overthinking is something that we all suffer from. I think for me, the biggest, I'm trying to answer it, but it's difficult to answer because there's no like magic pill that you can take. However, for me, the shift from fear, which is why I drank, why I used, to faith has been the biggest transformation I can make. I sponsor a lot of people, and I was talking to a sponsee the other day. Somebody said something to her. She was crazy. She was mad. She went in the house. She grabbed a cigarette. She grabbed a cup of coffee, and she started to cycle. She thought of revenge, how she would get back at this guy, how she would punish him, how she would never speak to him again. And then she realized what she was doing. She realized her mind was unmanageable, and the thoughts were circling. And she had a voice in her head. Luckily, it was my voice. And it said to her, say the serenity prayer. And she said the serenity prayer for 20 times, more. She just said it on cycle. And it disrupted her thinking. And she realized she had a choice. She didn't have to sit there obsessing about the problem. And she thought of a new solution. She actually saw how she could deal with it in a much better way. So recovery gives you tools, in summary, and helps us all do things better, and without damaging ourselves, without being bitter, without being resentful, and without living in fear. Thank you.
Thank you. Bhavna, do you have anything to add to that?
So I think for me, when it comes to to not overthink, I think thinking was my way of thinking I could control things outside of myself. Control was a very big coping mechanism I developed to deal with what came with my husband's addiction. And what I'm learning, and I'm not very good at it, it is one day at a time. It's, we don't get a medal if we do the 12 steps, but what we do get is peace. But what I'm learning is my higher power only meets me in the present. When I'm thinking, I'm not being present. I'm, either, it's fear-based, right? It's either projecting in the future or worrying about the past, none of which I can change. So for me, what's happened, what really makes a big difference from this overthinking is just to be present. For me, taking, serenity prayer is my go-to, taking a few deep breaths and just realizing I am here now and I'm not in here and those things haven't happened. And in all reality, nothing really happens the way I think it's going to happen. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. What I really appreciate about what you've both shared is the ability to interrupt the cycle. And that recovery takes you from one vice to a virtue. So from fear to faith, from shame to peace, from whatever the X is to the recovery virtue. So I'll ask Muraya if you want to tackle your question, and then maybe Sunday, and then we'll kind of keep going round. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I see here 2 questions that have my name in them. So I'll do the first one, which is I've tried to help my brother for many years, rehabs a few times, but he still relapses. Everyone in the family has given up. This unfortunately is the experience of many people. And in fact, we tell families that the fact that somebody has relapsed does not mean they've failed. In a way, they've come closer to their ultimate recovery. And even when somebody does get into stable recovery, it wasn't the most recent intervention that did it. It was a combination of all the interventions, all the efforts, all the so-called lapses or relapses that look like failure. Because recovery is not an event. It's an ongoing journey. It's a process. Just as addiction is a process, you don't become addicted in one day. It took years to get to where you are. It'll take some time to achieve what we call stable recovery. Recovery